the iron taste of dawn. At 4 a.m, the Blue Star Diner stands open like a tired eye. Outside, the highway runs gray and indifferent, stitching together towns that died with the mines. The air smells of wet asphalt and old diesel. Inside, the light is thin and metallic. Lucas sits at the counter and presses his palm against his chest through a cheap cotton shirt. He does not feel a pulse. He feels a dry, mechanical pinch, precise and humorless. The coffee in his cup trembles as a truck passes. It is not his hand that shakes. It is the road. The mug is heavy, honest ceramic. The laminate counter is cold and smooth under his fingers. Morning objects carry weight. They do not pretend. Lucas feels like an engine that received a new part, but no oil. Everything works. Nothing moves freely. Elena walks behind the counter. Her steps are slow, economical. When she bends, her joints answer with a faint crack. She sets the bill beside his cup. Her fingers are yellowed from tobacco, the nails short and square. Lucas looks at her hands and thinks of the sterile thing inside him, titanium, silicon, sealed against blood and doubt. He hates its cleanliness. It does not age. It does not forgive. He watches her wipe the same strip of counter she has wiped for years. The cloth moves in small circles, patient as weather. He envies her fatigue. Her heart can slow when it wants to. His cannot fall below its appointed number. The machine inside him refuses mercy. It keeps him alert, obedient, awake. Elena glances at him. "You look pale," she says quietly. Lucas nods. He pays in cash. Outside, another truck roars past, and the cup gives one last shiver. He presses his chest again, as if confirming ownership. The rhythm answers, steady, foreign. Dawn gathers behind the windows, thin as steel. The foundry stands at the edge of town like a rib cage picked clean. Its windows are blind with soot, its gates stitched shut with rust. Lucas walks along the fence, hands in his pockets, collar turned against the damp. The air smells of iron and something sweeter beneath it. Rust has the patience of dried blood. He stops where the concrete is darker than the rest. Years ago, his father fell there, between the loading dock and the yard. No thunder, no warning. Just a hand pressed to the chest and a slow collapse, as if kneeling to tie a boot. The heart had been tired. It was allowed to stop. Inside Lucas, something flashes brief, electrical, almost polite. A correction. The device adjusts, invisible and exact. He waits for pain, but none comes. Only the awareness that he has been measured and restored to standard rhythm. His father had no such guardian. His father belonged to gravity. Wind moves through the broken vents and carries a hollow hum across the yard. Lucas places his palm against the cold metal of the fence. He tries to imagine what it would be like to slow down without permission, to let exhaustion speak in its own language. The thought feels dangerous. The machine answers with its steady insistence. He stands there longer than necessary. The factory does not accuse him. It has already forgotten the men who built it. Lucas turns away at last. His heart continues faithful and foreign, beating not from will, but from mandate. The motel room smells of detergent and damp carpet. A wall clock ticks with unnecessary authority. Lucas sits on the edge of the bed, jacket still on, shoes planted on the warm floral pattern. The radiator coughs once and falls silent. In the quiet, he becomes aware of the rhythm inside him, not loud, not soft, regulated. He takes the folded brochure from his wallet. The paper is thin, almost cheerful. Service life, 10 to 12 years. The numbers stand clean and indifferent. He calculates without wanting to. Years become months. Months shrink into days. He counts the way prisoners mark walls, without hope of shortening the sentence. The device inside him does not know love or grief. It knows voltage and thresholds. If the heart slows, It intervenes. If it stumbles, it corrects. Lucas wonders which of his feelings have already been flattened into acceptable curves. Anger reduced to a pulse. Desire translated into a spike. Sorrow trimmed before it can deepen. He lies back on the bed and stares at the ceiling stain shaped like a continent. His life now depends on supply chains, shipping routes, sterile rooms where replacements wait in labeled drawers. Somewhere, a warehouse holds the continuation of his breath. The thought is colder than death. Death is an ending. Logistics is maintenance. The clock continues. He presses his palm to his chest, then lets it fall. The rhythm remains obedient. He does not pray. He listens to the ticking and tries to decide which sound is truly his. The gas station stands beyond the railroad crossing, its lights humming against the early dark. Rainwater gathers in shallow depressions of cracked asphalt. Lucas finds Hari behind the service bay, bent over the open belly of a generator. The smell of fuel is sharp and honest. Metal lies exposed without shame. Hari straightens slowly. His beard is streaked with gray grease. They shake hands without pressure. Words are unnecessary at first. A bottle of beer appears from a cooler near the wall. Hari offers it. Lucas shakes his head. "Can't," he says. He does not explain that even alcohol feels like interference now, a risk to the imposed rhythm. Hari turns back to the engine. He listens the way some men listen to confession. The motor coughs, then settles into a rough vibration. "Hear that?" Hari says. "Valves sticking, but it'll pull a while longer." He smiles at the flaw as if it were character. Lucas places his hand on the vibrating hood. The tremor travels through his palm into his bones. The engine is imperfect, unreliable, alive in its resistance. It is allowed to fail when it fails. No silent correction waits beneath its casing. No hidden authority smooths its hesitation. For a moment, Lucas envies the stuttering machine. He envies the right to brake without consultation. Above them, the station's neon sign flickers and steadies. Hari wipes his hands on a rag. Lucas withdraws his palm from the metal and feels only his own measured beat steady, sanctioned beyond argument. The grocery store stands bright and indifferent at the edge of town. Its sliding doors open with a tired sigh. Fluorescent light flattens everything: faces, fruit, intentions. Lucas pauses before the security gates at the entrance. The thin metal frames look harmless, almost decorative. He studies them as if they were border guards. A woman with a child walks past him, plastic bags cutting into her fingers. A man in work boots follows, smelling of paint and sweat. They pass through the gates without hesitation. Nothing interrupts them. They are whole. Lucas remains still, aware of the quiet authority inside his chest. He has read the manual twice. Magnetic fields, interference thresholds, approved environments. The words were calm, technical. Yet here, before these narrow frames, he imagines a spark leaping invisibly toward him, confusing the rhythm, rewriting it. The fear is not traumatic, it is practical. His pulse lifts slightly. He feels it as a tightening behind the ribs. Immediately the device answers. Cool, corrective. The acceleration is flattened, pressed back into acceptable range. Even his fear is moderated. He exhales, irritated by the efficiency. At last he steps forward. The gates do nothing. No alarm sounds. No invisible force reaches for him. He walks into the store among rows of bread and detergent. Still, he feels constructed, assembled from components rather than born of flesh. The others carry groceries. Lucas carries circuitry. By evening, the sky lowers itself over the motel like a lid. Rain begins without ceremony. It strikes the tin overhang outside Lucas's window in a steady, indifferent rhythm. The drops wash dust from the sill and drag thin lines through the grime. The world cleans itself without asking permission. He lies on the narrow bed, shoes off now, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. The room is dark except for the pale flicker of a passing car. He tries to listen inward. He wants to separate his own pulse from the imposed one, but all he hears clearly is the rain constant, unregulated. He does not fear dying. That thought surprises him with its calmness. Death belongs to men, to flesh that weakens and surrenders. What he fears is malfunction. A red light in a sterile corridor. A technician explaining a recall. A fault code where a feeling should have been. Lightning flashes somewhere far off. The thunder arrives late, muted by distance. His chest remains steady through it all. No surge, no hesitation. The device inside him ignores the storm. It keeps its measured interval, as if weather were a rumor. Lucas turns onto his side and closes his eyes. The rain continues its patient tapping on the metal roof. For a moment, he imagines it seeping through the ceiling, reaching the circuitry, forcing an honest silence. But the roof holds. The rhythm persists. He waits for sleep, as one waits for maintenance, without trust, without protest. Elena knocks softly, as if the door might already be asleep. When Lucas opens it, the hallway light frames her in a thin yellow outline. Her hair smells faintly of smoke and dishwater. She steps inside without ceremony and sits on the edge of the bed, hands folded between her knees. They do not speak at first. The rain has thinned to a distant dripping from the gutter. Elena studies the wallpaper as if it might offer instruction. Lucas stands by the window, unsure where to place his hands. The room feels smaller with another heartbeat inside it. At last, she leans toward him. "Come here," she says quietly. He sits beside her. She rests her head against his chest. Her ear presses through cotton and bone, searching for something human. Lucas goes rigid. He wants her to hear warmth, fatigue, doubt anything uneven. Instead, there is only the precise tick, regular as a metronome. Not loud, but undeniable. Elena lifts her head after a moment. "Your heart sounds like a clock," she says. There is no accusation in her voice, only distance. Lucas reaches for a cigarette and lights it. Smoke fills the small room, blurring the edges of the furniture and his own reflection in the dark window. Elena watches him once more, then looks away. Between them, the rhythm continues faithful, foreign, untouched by touch. The storm gathers again after midnight. Wind pushes against the motel walls, testing their patience. Lucas steps outside without a coat. Rain strikes his face with small, cold precision. Above him, the power lines stretch across the black sky, humming faintly as if thinking aloud. He walks toward the empty lot behind the building, where puddles reflect broken pieces of light. The wires overhead vibrate in the wind. He stands directly beneath them. The air smells of ozone and wet dust. For a moment, he imagines the current descending, seeking the metal hidden under his ribs. He does not pray for death. He waits for conflict. Nature against engineering. Storm against circuitry. He wants the sky to argue with the device inside him, to prove that flesh still belongs to larger forces. His pulse rises with the tension. Immediately, the correction comes calm, decisive. The surge is flattened before it becomes fear. The rain runs down his collar and into his shirt. He shivers, but the rhythm inside remains steady, unbothered by thunder or longing. Nothing happens. No lightning chooses him. No wire snaps in sympathy. After a while, the cold reaches his bones. He turns back toward the motel, soaked and unchanged. The steel within him has endured. It is stronger than his defiance. Dawn comes without drama. The rain has washed the air clean, and the sky above the highway is pale, almost metallic. Lucas sits on the motel steps, elbows on his knees, hands hanging loosely between them. Water drips from the roof in slow, deliberate intervals. Somewhere in the distance, a truck changes gears. The factory chimneys on the horizon stand dark and hollow. Steam no longer rises from them. Rust glows faintly where the first light touches it. Lucas watches the sun climb behind those dead structures. The world does not apologize for surviving. He realizes he has stopped checking his pulse. His hand rests on his thigh, not on his chest. The rhythm continues without his supervision. It no longer feels like an intruder. It feels like a condition like weather, like gravity. He thinks of batteries, service appointments, warranty cards folded in wallets. The future is no longer a question of courage, but of maintenance. He understands this now. Existence has narrowed to simple endurance between two inspections. The light strengthens. His fingers are steady in it. For a long moment, he does nothing at all. The machine inside him works. He works. This is not triumph. It is not defeat. It is the quiet agreement to last another day. The sun rises higher, colorless and exact. Traffic begins to stitch the highway together again. Lucas remains on the steps until the cold seeps through his jeans. The night has taken nothing from him. The machine has surrendered nothing either. He stands and feels the stiffness in his back, the ordinary protest of muscle and bone. These small aches reassure him. They belong to him. They are not regulated or corrected. He walks toward the vending machine beside the office and studies his reflection in the scratched metal. The face looking back is tired, but it is continuous. For a moment, he presses his fingers against his chest again, not to check, only to acknowledge. The rhythm answers, steady and impersonal. It is no longer an enemy. It is not a friend. It is simply the condition under which he exists. A truck passes, dragging a long shadow across the lot. The sound fades into distance. Lucas turns toward the road. He does not think about storms or wires or expiration dates. He thinks about coffee, about walking, about the weight of his steps on wet pavement. The foreign rhythm remains beneath his skin, precise as ever. Above it, breath. Around it, morning. He moves forward without drama, carrying steel and flesh in the same body, and neither one asks permission from the other. Last stop before dawn. The town in Wyoming lay flat under the wind, plastic scraps circling a dead gas station like tired birds. The helpline office occupied a former sewing factory, its brick walls holding the night inside. Only one row of monitors was lit, casting a blue, exhausted glow across the room. Judy studied her hands beneath the fluorescent light. They looked borrowed. A plastic cup of coffee stood near the keyboard, a thin film sealed across its surface. She had not slept for 2 days. The fatigue was not heavy. It was clear, like a shard of glass resting quietly in her palm. A wall clock hammered the seconds into the plaster. Judy turned the pages of the instruction binder. Hope, tomorrow, support. The words had dried out long ago. Her headset cable twisted around itself again. She untangled it carefully. In the drawer beside her lay a small bottle, her private exit ticket. She did not open it. Not yet. The signal came as a short, dry beep. A man's voice followed, steady and almost polite. A truck driver parked off Interstate 80. He spoke as if describing weather. There was a pause, then the metallic click of a lighter. The sound settled between them. They discussed the cold first, how Nebraska empties itself at night, how quickly an engine loses warmth. Judy touched her wrist when the pulse moved without asking permission. "It's very dark out here," he said. "No stars." She was supposed to speak about miracles. Instead, she listened. He told her about Ohio, about a factory reduced to gravel, about a house sold to strangers, a woman who left without slamming the door. Judy watched her reflection in the dark window. She remembered her husband, lost in a war that had already faded from memory. No anger remained, only a fine gray dust. When he said his cigarette was almost finished, she felt the silence lean closer. "Tell me about your dog," she said. "The one afraid of thunder." A long breath crossed the line. "He wasn't afraid," the driver answered. "He just knew the sky was angry." A key turned. The engine coughed, then steadied. "I'll drive to the next station," he said. "Better coffee there." The line went dead without farewell. Morning arrived as a pale correction. Judy gathered the tablets from the desk and returned them to the drawer. Not today. She stepped outside, lit a cigarette, and watched the smoke dissolve into the damp air. There was no triumph in it, only the simple fact she was still here. And somewhere on the road, between one emptiness and another, so was he. By mid-morning, the building looked smaller, as if daylight had exposed its fatigue. The blue from the monitors faded into a pale, indifferent glow. Judy remained at her desk while the others arrived, carrying paper cups and fragments of sleep. Their voices were careful. No one asked how the night had been. Nights were not discussed here. They were endured. She wrote the report in short, obedient sentences. Caller stabilized. Agreed to continue travel. No immediate risk declared. The language felt mechanical, almost hygienic. It removed the man's breathing, the lighter's metallic spark, the darkness without stars. She paused over the word stabilized. It sounded like something done to a cracked bone. At noon, she stepped outside again. The wind had settled, leaving behind a wide and vacant sky. Across the road, the abandoned gas station reflected the sun in broken windows. For a moment, she imagined a truck moving along a distant strip of asphalt. Just a moving dot between horizons. 50 miles could be a lifetime, or nothing. Back inside, the drawer waited. She opened it without ceremony and held the small bottle in her hand. It was light, lighter than the headset, lighter than the binder full of borrowed hope. She set it back in place and closed the drawer with 2 fingers, as if sealing an envelope she had not yet decided to send. The wall clock resumed its quiet hammering. Another signal would come. Another voice from another darkened parking lot. Judy adjusted the headset and straightened the cable. Outside, the day widened without promise. She did not feel saved. She felt occupied. And for now, that was enough. The afternoon dragged itself across the windows like a tired animal. Calls came and went. A woman whispering from a bathroom floor. A boy who said nothing at all and then hung up. Judy answered each voice with the same steady tone, as if she were placing bricks, one by one, against a rising flood. There was no gratitude on either side of the line, only necessity. Between calls, she watched the parking lot. The asphalt shimmered under a thin sun. A delivery truck passed once, then the road returned to its habitual emptiness. She thought of the driver from the night before. Somewhere ahead of him, there would be another rest stop, another machine dispensing bitter coffee into a paper cup. Movement was a modest kind of faith. Her colleague, Martha, left a sandwich on her desk without comment. Judy unwrapped it and took 2 mechanical bites. The bread tasted of nothing. She realized she was listening for the metallic click of a lighter that was not there. The silence inside the office felt heavier than the silence on the highway. Near evening, a familiar number flashed briefly on the screen and disappeared before she could answer. It might have been coincidence. It might have been him. The system logged it as a missed attempt. Judy stared at the empty line of data. The clock hammered on. When her shift ended, she did not hurry. She removed the headset carefully, coiled the cable, and placed it beside the monitor. Outside, the air had cooled again. The first shadows stretched across the lot. Night would return soon, patient and unremarkable. Judy walked to her car, knowing that somewhere along Interstate 80, a truck was still moving through the dark, and that movement, slow, imperfect, stubborn, was sometimes the only argument left. Night returned without ceremony. The sewing factory swallowed the light again, and the monitors resumed their pale vigil. Judy sat down as if she had never left. The chair recognized her weight. The clock resumed its quiet assault on the wall. Outside, the wind had found its voice again, pushing dust along the empty street. The calls were fewer tonight. A man drunk on cheap whiskey recited apologies to no one in particular. A young girl breathed into the receiver and then disconnected. Judy answered them all with the same measured cadence. She did not offer miracles. She offered minutes. Sometimes minutes were sufficient. Near midnight, a truck passed on the distant highway. The sound reached her as a low, continuous murmur. She imagined headlights cutting through Nebraska's flat darkness. A thermos between the seats. A mat folded too many times. She did not know if it was him. She did not need to know. The fact of motion was enough. She opened the drawer again. The bottle remained where she had left it, indifferent and patient. She placed it on the desk and looked at it for a long while. Under the fluorescent light, the tablets appeared harmless, almost polite. She touched one with her fingertip and felt nothing. The signal did not come. No familiar voice crossed the line. Only the steady breathing of machines and the persistent ticking of time. Judy returned the bottle to the drawer and locked it this time, not as a declaration, simply as procedure. Toward dawn, the sky began to pale behind the factory windows. It was not hope. It was repetition. Judy rested her forehead briefly against the cool glass and listened to the wind recede. Somewhere beyond the horizon, engines were starting. Coffee was being poured. Roads were being chosen again. She adjusted her headset and waited for the next small sound that would ask her to stay. The fifth night carried a different stillness, not heavier, only more precise. The air inside the factory felt thinner, as if the walls had exhaled too often. Judy arrived before her shift and sat in the dark without turning on the monitors. For a moment, the room belonged to no one. Then she pressed the power button, and the blue light returned like a quiet command. She no longer checked the caller log first. The missed number from 2 nights ago remained there, small and unresolved. It could have been anyone. She understood that hope often disguises itself as statistics. She adjusted the headset and waited for the beep that separated silence from obligation. When the call came, it was not his voice. It was an elderly woman describing the way her house sounded at night, how the pipes knocked like distant footsteps. Judy listened carefully. The woman spoke about her late husband as if he had just stepped into another room. Judy found herself describing the weather outside, the factory dry wind, low clouds, a sky reluctant to commit to rain. They spoke for 23 minutes. It was enough. During a pause between calls, Judy stood and walked to the window. Across the road, the dead gas station sign creaked faintly. She imagined Interstate 80 stretching like a scar across the plains. Somewhere along it, a truck would be parked again, or moving, or already gone beyond her reach. She understood now that she was not guarding outcomes. She was guarding intervals. Near dawn, the sky shifted from black to diluted gray. Judy opened the drawer one last time and removed the bottle. She did not examine the tablets. Instead, she carried the bottle to the small sink near the break table and emptied it into the drain. The sound was soft, almost embarrassed. She rinsed the glass and set it upside down to dry. When she returned to her desk, the monitors were still glowing. The clock was still working against the wall. Nothing grand had occurred. A truck might still be traveling through the Midwest, or it might not. Judy placed the headset over her ears as the first call of morning signaled through. There was no revelation in her posture, only a decision so modest it could almost be missed. She would remain on the line. The mornings began to resemble each other. The factory windows admitted a diluted light that erased the sharpness of night, but offered nothing in return. Judy no longer counted the hours she had been awake. Time moved here in shifts, not in days. She arrived, she listened, she left. The rhythm was simple enough to survive. A week passed without the metallic click she remembered. The system recorded hundreds of voices, fractured, angry, pleading, indifferent. She answered them all. She did not search for patterns anymore. Survival did not announce itself with repetition. It hid in small continuations. A caller agreeing to drink water, to step outside, to postpone a decision by 10 minutes. One evening, as wind pressed against the building, a familiar steadiness crossed the line. No introduction. Just breathing, then a quiet, "It's dark again." Judy did not allow surprise to enter her voice. She described the Wyoming sky instead, how it held a faint seam of silver above the horizon. The man spoke about a new route, about freight heading west. He mentioned a dog he had seen at a truck stop, chained but alive. They did not revisit the night of the cigarette. They did not speak of rescue. They spoke of miles, of coffee that tasted burnt but reliable, of engines that required patience in cold weather. When silence came, it felt less absolute, less final. Before hanging up, he said, "I drove past that first station." Kept going. There was no pride in it, only statement. Judy nodded, though he could not see her. After the line went quiet, she removed the headset and rested her hands on the desk. They no longer looked borrowed. Outside, dawn approached again, indifferent and exact. The old gas station sign groaned in the wind. Somewhere along Interstate 80, a truck continued forward. Judy understood that neither of them had been saved in any grand sense. They had simply chosen another stretch of road. And for now, that was sufficient. Autumn arrived without announcement. The wind grew sharper, carrying dust and the smell of distant rain across the flat Wyoming streets. Inside the former sewing factory, the monitors kept their steady blue vigil. Judy had learned the exact tone of each machine, the faint hum beneath the calls. It was a kind of companionship, mechanical, reliable. The truck driver called irregularly now. Sometimes weeks passed, sometimes only days. He never gave his name. He spoke of highways as if they were weather systems, inevitable, shifting, impersonal. Once he mentioned Ohio again, but without bitterness. The factory site had been cleared completely. "Looks like nothing ever stood there," he said. Judy understood that erasure could feel cleaner than ruins. She told him about the abandoned gas station across from her office, how one of the windows had finally collapsed inward, how grass had begun to grow through cracks in the concrete. They compared these quiet surrenders as if discussing old acquaintances. Neither of them tried to rescue the past from itself. One night he described snow along Interstate 80, thin at first, then heavier. He said the road demanded attention, that steering required both hands. Judy listened to the careful way he breathed. There was no talk of darkness this time, only distance and the patience it required. After the call ended, she remained seated, headset resting lightly against her ears. The clock hammered on. Outside, the wind pressed against the building again. Judy no longer kept anything in the drawer. The space was empty, functional. She had not replaced what she had poured away. Near dawn, she stepped outside for air. Frost edged the pavement. The sky held a pale seam of light, precise and indifferent. She did not feel hopeful. She felt aligned with something quieter, the repetition of engines starting, of calls connecting, of roads continuing past what seemed like their last station. Somewhere in the wide country, a truck moved carefully through snow. And here, in a small Wyoming town, a woman remained on the line. Winter settled in fully, pressing its weight against the town until even the wind seemed disciplined. The abandoned gas station stood wrapped in frost, its sign tilted further, as if bowing to the season. Inside the helpline office, the heaters rattled without conviction. The monitors continued their pale labor, indifferent to temperature. Judy had grown used to the quiet intervals between calls. She no longer filled them with thought. Silence had become a room she could sit in without fear. When the truck driver called now, his voice carried a different texture, less hollow, more deliberate. He spoke about schedules, about freight that had to arrive by morning. He mentioned a mechanic in Nebraska who adjusted his brakes and refused extra payment. "Some people still tighten what's loose," he said. She answered with small observations. The snow that collected against the factory windows. The way the sky cleared sharply after a storm, revealing a cold, exact blue. They did not revisit the drawer or the night of the first cigarette. Those details had retreated into the background, like scars that no longer throb. One evening, he described pulling over not from exhaustion, but to watch the sunrise over an empty stretch of land. Didn't want to miss it, he said. Judy imagined the horizon unfolding ahead of him, not as promise, but as simple geography, a line separating darkness from its repetition. After the call ended, she remained still. The clock marked time with its steady insistence. Outside, the snow reflected the early light, turning the world almost colorless. Judy understood that nothing dramatic had shifted. There were still empty towns, still lost factories, still nights without stars. But engines continued to start. Calls continued to connect. And in the narrow space between despair and routine, two distant lives had chosen to persist, not loudly, not heroically, but with the quiet endurance of machines that keep running, because stopping would require more effort than moving forward. Spring came reluctantly. The snow retreated into thin gray seams along the road, then disappeared altogether. The abandoned gas station shed another piece of its roof. Across the plains, the wind carried the smell of thawing earth. Inside the helpline office, nothing changed. The monitors glowed. The clock hammered. Judy took her seat and placed the headset over her ears with the same deliberate motion. The truck driver called less often now. Weeks could pass in silence. When his voice returned, it sounded steadier, almost occupied. He spoke about a new contract, longer routes, more predictable hours. Keeps the mind busy, he said. He described a small diner off Interstate 80, where the waitress remembered his order. Burnt coffee, eggs overcooked, reliable. They did not speak about the night when darkness had pressed too close. It lingered between them like a distant mile marker, acknowledged but no longer decisive. Judy told him the old gas station across from her office had finally been sold. Someone planned to tear it down. About time, he answered, not cruelly, just fact. One evening, he mentioned a stray dog that had begun following trucks at a rest stop. Smart enough to stay near engines, he said. Judy pictured the animal choosing warmth over wandering. She understood the logic. After the call ended, she remained seated a moment longer. The sky outside was no longer gray, but pale blue, almost fragile. Dawn approached without drama. Judy removed the headset and looked at her reflection in the dark monitor. The face staring back did not seem borrowed anymore. Somewhere along the long ribbon of highway, a truck moved through open country. Somewhere in a small Wyoming town, a woman remained ready for the next voice. There was no victory in it, only continuation. And sometimes continuation was the only proof that the last station had not yet. Restructuring at night, the tower rose above the wet streets like a block of ice that refused to melt. Inside, the air was dry and faintly metallic, touched by ozone and cheap detergent. Sam pushed his cart across the thick carpet without sound, as if he were crossing fresh snow. The 42nd floor held a weightless night. Through the vast windows, the city burned in scattered lights that belonged to no one. He did not look at the distance. He watched the reflection in the glass, a man in a gray uniform whose face dissolved each time headlights moved below. On the polished desks, objects had been abandoned with quiet confidence. A silver-framed family photograph, a glass of mineral water half drunk, a heavy pen resting beside a closed laptop. Sam wiped the dust around the frame, but did not touch it. The smiling woman inside seemed part of a museum exhibit, something preserved behind invisible barriers. By morning, the water would be poured out. No one in the photograph would ever know that he had stood here, guarding the silence of their success while they slept in distant suburbs. He drew the rubber squeegee from his cart. The sound it made against the damp surface was long and thin, almost indecent in the sterile quiet. He repeated the motion again and again. His joints ached not sharply, but persistently, like an old unpaid debt. Each stroke removed a film of city grime, yet the wall between him and the world beyond the glass seemed to thicken. He was cleaning a view he would never claim, preparing it for eyes that would never notice the barrier at all. Near midnight, the security guard appeared. Henry carried a dented thermos and moved with the caution of a man who had already fallen once in life. They did not greet each other. Henry sat on the leather sofa meant for executives and unscrewed the lid. The smell of burnt coffee spread through the immaculate room and collided with the scent of expensive upholstery. "Rain," Henry said. "Rain," Sam answered. It was enough. Outside, the weather would undo whatever could be undone. Inside, the glass would remain obediently clear. Toward dawn, a thin metallic light gathered in the east. The city lights went out one by one, as if someone were closing tired eyes. Sam stood before the window of the executive office and saw his hands reflected veined, marked by chemicals, steady. He understood that tomorrow he would wipe this same pain, and the day after, and the year after that. The building would endure. The men in photographs would change. He felt no anger, only a calm exhaustion that settled in his chest and stayed there, like breath that had decided not to leave. By the time the offices emptied the next evening, the rain had turned the streets below into a blurred ribbon of light. Sam rode the service elevator alone. The mirror inside was scratched, clouded at the edges. It returned his outline, but withheld detail. He preferred it that way. A man without sharp features could pass through a building unnoticed. On the 42nd floor, a conference room door stood half open. The air carried the stale heat of arguments that had already cooled. Coffee cups, lipstick on one rim, a tie forgotten over the back of a chair. On the screen at the end of the table, frozen numbers glowed in pale blue. Profit projections, loss forecasts, lines rising and falling like restrained heartbeats. Sam unplugged the projector. The numbers disappeared at once. The silence that followed was cleaner than any surface he could wipe. In a corner office, he found a jacket draped over a chair. Fine wool. The pockets were heavy. For a moment, he imagined money, or at least something decisive. Inside, there was only a subway ticket and a crumpled receipt for a child's medicine. He smoothed the paper, then put it back exactly as he had found it. Even here, above the city, men carried small, fragile worries folded close to their bodies. Henry arrived later than usual. His cough preceded him down the corridor. He leaned against the doorframe and watched Sam work the glass. "They'll cut another department," Henry said. "They always do," Sam answered. Henry nodded, as if this confirmed a private calculation. In buildings like this, decisions were made in bright rooms and paid for in darker ones. When dawn pressed its dull light against the windows, Sam paused. The city looked tired, stripped of glamour. Buses moved like slow insects along the wet streets. He felt the same narrow corridor inside himself. He had felt for years: work, sleep, work again. Not despair, something steadier. He lifted the squeegee and drew it down the glass once more, leaving behind a clear path no one would ever thank him for. The third night began with wind. It moved between the buildings and struck the glass in flat palms, as if asking to be let in. Sam signed his name in the logbook downstairs. The pen was chained to the desk. The ink hesitated before flowing. He wrote carefully, though no one ever read the signatures. On the upper floors, the offices smelled faintly of perfume and overheated wiring. In one cubicle, a desk lamp had been left on. Its yellow circle of light revealed a stack of resignation letters clipped together. The top page carried a neat signature and a date from tomorrow. Sam switched off the lamp. The darkness returned without protest. Decisions here were often made before they were spoken. He worked along the corridor of windows. The city below was restless, sirens threading through the avenues. His reflection followed him from pain to pain. For a moment, he imagined the glass without him clean, impersonal, flawless. The thought did not wound him. It felt accurate. Near midnight, Henry joined him by the vending machines. He fed coins into the slot and received a plastic cup of coffee that trembled in his hand. "My son called," Henry said. "He's moving west," Sam nodded. "There's work there." "There's always work somewhere," Henry answered. He did not sound convinced. Toward morning, the wind dropped. A pale band of light formed behind the warehouses along the river. Sam stood in the executive office and looked at the empty chair behind the broad desk. For an instant, he imagined sitting in it, not as an intruder, but as a man expected to be there. The image dissolved quickly. He picked up his cloth and wiped the final trace of fingerprints from the polished surface. The room returned to its proper order, and he stepped out before the day could claim it. The fourth night carried a colder air. The lobby marble held the day's chill as if it had memory. Sam entered without sound, nodding once to the receptionist's empty desk. The flower arrangement there had begun to wilt. No one had removed it. Even in buildings that worshipped permanence, small things were allowed to fade. Upstairs, the offices were unusually tidy. Boxes stood beside several desks, sealed and labeled in careful handwriting. Someone had worked late to prepare for departure. Sam moved around them with his cart, careful not to disturb the geometry of endings. On one desk lay an envelope marked personal. It was heavier than paper should be. He did not touch it. He washed the glass walls of a corner office where the city spread out like a circuit board. The rain had stopped. The streets shone with a dry, metallic sheen. Each stroke of the squeegee drew a temporary clarity through the faint film of dust. His shoulders burned in a dull, familiar way. He thought of nothing while he worked. Thought required ownership. He owned only the movement. Henry arrived earlier than usual. He carried no thermos tonight. "They're closing 2 floors," he said, standing behind Sam's reflection. "For renovation?" "For silence," Henry replied. They watched the darkened offices beyond the corridor. Rooms without light seemed already erased, as if they had never held voices at all. Near dawn, Sam found himself alone on the 42nd floor. The building hummed with its internal systems, ventilation, servers, unseen currents of power. He pressed his palm briefly against the cool glass. It offered no resistance, no acknowledgement. Below, a delivery truck turned the corner, small and determined. When the first pale line of morning cut across the skyline, Sam gathered his tools. The tower remained upright and indifferent, ready to forget another night. The 5th night began without rain. The sky above the tower was clear and empty, like a page no one intended to write on. Sam crossed the lobby, where the guards changed shifts without ceremony. A new man sat behind the desk, younger, already tired. He did not look up when Sam passed. Recognition was unnecessary in places where everyone was temporary. On the 42nd floor, the air felt thinner. 2 offices had been cleared out entirely. Carpets showed pale rectangles where desks had stood for years. The absence was precise, almost surgical. Sam pushed his cart through the open spaces and listened to the hollow sound of its wheels. Emptiness had a different echo than furniture. It answered him more honestly. In the executive suite, he found the large desk stripped of papers. Only a faint outline remained where a computer had once rested. In the trash bin lay a torn photograph. He picked it up without thinking. A man in a suit stood beside a woman and a boy, all 3 squinting into sunlight. The tears split the father's face in 2. Sam placed the pieces together for a moment, then let them fall back into the bin. Repair was not part of his duties. Henry did not come upstairs that night. His chair by the vending machines was empty. The silence felt less shared, more exposed. Sam worked the windows alone. The city below seemed distant, almost theoretical, a diagram of light and movement. He watched his reflection pass across the glass, steady and indistinct. For a second, he imagined simply continuing forward, walking through the pain and out over the streets. The thought carried no drama, only distance. When the first gray of morning appeared, he stood in the vacant office and listened to the building breathe. Ventilation sighed through unseen ducts. Somewhere, a server clicked like a restrained pulse. Sam flexed his stiff fingers and returned the squeegee to the cart. The floors would close. New men would come. The glass would wait. He switched off the lights and left the room to its orderly abandonment. The sixth night arrived with a thin frost on the pavement. The air outside the tower was sharp, almost clean. Sam paused before entering and looked up at the rows of dark windows. A few still held light. Most did not. The building seemed taller when fewer people believed in it. Inside, the elevators moved more slowly. On the 42nd floor, a notice had been taped beside the main corridor. Restructuring in progress. The paper curled slightly at the corners. No signature. No explanation. Sam read it once and continued pushing his cart. Words like that belonged to others. Several desks had been dismantled. Exposed cables lay coiled on the carpet like discarded veins. In one office, a calendar still hung open to the wrong month. A red circle marked a date that would not be reached here. Sam removed the glass panels between the conference room and the hall, wiping them methodically. His arms trembled now when he lifted the bucket, not from weakness, from repetition. Henry was waiting near the windows. He held no coffee, no thermos. His coat was buttoned to the throat. "They let me go," he said quietly. Sam nodded. There was nothing in the statement that required surprise. "Tonight's my last round." They stood side by side, looking at the city that did not look back. Rain began again, fine and indifferent, tracing lines down the panes Sam had just cleaned. Near dawn, Henry's footsteps faded down the corridor for the final time. Sam remained alone with the glass and the slow whitening of the sky. He watched the water streak downward, undoing his work with patient certainty. For a moment, he considered leaving it that way. Then he lifted the squeegee and drew it across the surface once more. The building hummed. The morning came. Nothing had changed, and yet something essential had been removed. The seventh night felt wider. The lobby echoed when Sam crossed it, as if the building had already grown accustomed to fewer footsteps. The young guard from earlier in the week was gone. No one mentioned Henry. The logbook lay open, its pages turning slightly in the draft from the revolving door. Sam signed his name again. The ink bled faintly into the paper. On the 42nd floor, whole sections were dark now. Motion sensors no longer responded in certain corridors. He moved through patches of shadow, pushing his cart by memory. In the break room, a refrigerator hummed beside a sink filled with abandoned mugs. One cup bore a child's drawing in fading marker-crooked sun. Uneven house. Sam washed it carefully and set it upside down to dry, though no one would return to claim it. He worked the outer windows last. The city below seemed less brilliant than before, as if some agreement had been withdrawn. Entire blocks were unlit. The glass reflected him clearly tonight. No passing headlights blurred his outline. He saw the lines at the corners of his mouth, the gray at his temples. A man becoming transparent in a place that prized clarity. Near midnight, the wind rose again. It pressed against the panes with a low, steady force. Sam leaned the squeegee against the wall and rested his palms on the cool surface. For a moment, he imagined the tower empty of all of them. Executives, assistants, guards, cleaners, standing alone above the wet streets, like a monument to calculation. The thought did not frighten him. It felt inevitable. When morning began to thin the darkness, he packed his tools slowly. No one waited for his final sweep. No one measured his thoroughness. He switched off the remaining lights on the floor, one by one, until the corridor dissolved into shadow. In the elevator mirror, he saw only himself and the cart. The building remained upright behind him, holding its silence. Outside, the first buses moved through the pale air, and Sam walked toward his car without looking back. The eighth night carried a brittle quiet. Even the traffic below seemed muted, as if the city were conserving itself. Sam entered the tower and noticed that one of the lobby lights had burned out. No one had replaced it. The marble floor held a duller shine. Perfection required witnesses. Without them, it loosened. On the upper floors, more doors stood open. The offices no longer smelled of perfume or paper only, of cooling metal and ventilation. In the largest conference room, the long table had been dismantled, its surface leaning against the wall like a door removed from its hinges. Sam ran his cloth along it once, out of habit. Dust returned immediately, fine and indifferent. He found a small cardboard box beneath a desk in the executive suite. Inside lay a framed certificate, a paperweight shaped like a globe, and a pair of reading glasses. The lenses were smudged. He cleaned them carefully and set them back in the box. Objects waited with a patience their owners rarely possessed. The windows were streaked from last night's rain. Sam worked them slowly. Without Henry's quiet presence, the floor felt exposed, almost honest. The glass no longer separated two worlds. It reflected one that was thinning. Below, a billboard had gone dark. A single letter flickered and died. Near dawn, he stood in the emptied office and listened. The building's hum was softer now, as though certain systems had already been switched off. He placed his palm against the pane once more. Cold traveled through his skin and settled there. When the first light spread across the skyline, it revealed nothing new, only fewer lights to extinguish. Sam gathered his tools and left the floor to its widening silence. The man in the mirror. Night in the Ohio town did not fall. It settled, heavy and damp, between the empty factories. The old Ford Crown Victoria idled at the curb, its engine trembling like a tired animal. Inside, the air held cheap tobacco, cold coffee, and the sour trace of worn vinyl. A greenish light from the dashboard lay across Elle's hands. The wipers moved out of habit, though the rain had almost stopped. Their rhythm sounded less like weather, and more like a clock that had forgotten why it was ticking. This was not work. It was vigil. Elle watched the world through the narrow rectangle of the rearview mirror. Faces appeared there without context, eyes rimmed red from sleepless shifts, lips pressed thin, fingers knotted together in private arithmetic. At 2:15 each night, he carried the same woman from the poultry plant. She opened the window an inch, always an inch, letting in a blade of cold air. They never spoke. The draft was their only exchange, sharp and brief. Later, a man in a cheap suit slid into the back seat and said only, "Drive." They passed dark steel mills and parking lots where figures slept in cars that would not start by morning. The man struck a match, but could not steady his hand. Elle did not offer a lighter. Assistance can humiliate more than silence. In the mirror, he saw the man catch his own reflection and turn away, as if from an accusation. 10 years earlier, Elle had lived in another state, in a house with a porch light that waited for him. Now he understood that every passenger carried a version of himself earlier or later. It made no difference. There was no destination that improved a man. There was only the road and the fuel gauge lowering itself towards zero with quiet discipline. The man stepped out at a crumbling motel and left behind a creased Polaroid. A child stood by a lake, caught in a sun that seemed almost artificial. Elle held the photograph between his fingers, feeling the rough edge of the paper. He did not call out. He placed it in the ashtray beside the dead cigarettes, another fragment stored in his metal box on wheels. Dawn thinned the sky above the smokestacks. The first light revealed dust on the windshield, but offered nothing else. Elle started the engine and drove on, not toward rest, but toward the next hour that required him. The second hour before dawn was always the thinnest. The town seemed to hold its breath, as if unsure it deserved another morning. Elle drove without music. The radio had long ago surrendered to static, and he preferred it that way. Words filled space too easily. Silence kept its weight. At 2:15, she was waiting under the broken street lamp. The woman from the poultry plant wore the same gray jacket, stiff with the smell of disinfectant and feathers. She entered without greeting and opened the window her usual inch. Cold air slid between them. It carried the faint odor of blood and ammonia from the processing line. Elle kept his eyes on the mirror. Her face was pale, almost metallic in the green dashboard light. She looked not at him, but at the darkness behind them, as if something might follow. They stopped at her building, a concrete block pressed between a pawn shop and a shuttered laundromat. She paid in exact change, coins counted in her palm before she handed them over. For a moment, her fingers rested against his. They were colder than the night. Then she was gone, swallowed by a hallway that never showed light in its windows. Elle remained parked longer than necessary. In the rearview mirror, he saw only the empty seat, the faint outline where she had been. The inch of open window still let in air. He did not close it immediately. Some absences needed space. When he finally drove off, the streets were nearly colorless. Traffic lights blinked yellow over intersections no one crossed. Elle understood that nothing in this town asked to be saved. It only asked to continue. He adjusted the mirror slightly, not to see better, but to confirm that he was still there. The next passenger flagged him down near a 24-hour pharmacy whose lights hummed against the dark. He was young, though the night had already worked on his face. A hood pulled low, hands buried in the sleeves of a sweatshirt too thin for February. He slid into the back seat and gave an address that sounded temporary, like something memorized an hour ago. They drove past the river where the water moved without reflection. Warehouses stood along the banks, their windows boarded like blind eyes. In the mirror, Elle saw the boy watching the city retreat, jaw set in a way that tried to resemble resolve. His knee bounced against the torn upholstery. Each movement seemed louder than it was. Halfway across the bridge, the boy asked what time it was. Elle told him. 3:07. The answer hung between them, precise and useless. The boy nodded, as if the number confirmed something he had feared. He pressed his forehead briefly to the glass. Breath clouded the window and faded. Elle remembered another bridge, another winter, when he had believed departure was a form of courage. He had left without looking back, convinced that distance would correct what he had damaged. It had not. Roads only rearranged regret. They did not dissolve it. At the address, a row of narrow houses leaning toward one another for support, the boy hesitated before opening the door. He searched his pockets twice, then paid with crumpled bills. In the mirror, their eyes met for a second. There was no request in them, only calculation. The door shut softly. Elle drove on, carrying the faint warmth the boy had left behind, already cooling in the rear seat. By 4, the town had turned brittle. The air sharpened, and even the neon seemed tired of itself. Elle drove past the old steel plant, where the smokestacks rose like monuments to a war no one remembered declaring. He slowed without meaning to. The place had once meant wages, noise, a reason to wake before dawn. Now it was only fenced silence and a warning sign bleached by weather. A call came through the dispatcher's dry voice pickup near the county hospital. The entrance doors opened and closed with mechanical patience. A nurse stepped out first, her shoulders bent forward as if she were still bracing against fluorescent light. Behind her came a man in a denim jacket, holding a plastic bag that contained nothing heavier than paper. They did not walk together, yet they moved in the same direction. The man entered the back seat alone. He gave an address and then changed it midway, as though one destination might hurt less than another. In the mirror, Elle saw the plastic bag crumpled between his hands. Hospital bracelets still circled his wrist. He did not remove them. Some things are easier to carry than to explain. They passed through neighborhoods where porches sagged and flags hung without wind. The man cleared his throat once, twice, but no words followed. Elle did not ask. Questions suggest there is an answer worth hearing. Outside, a freight train cut across an intersection, its metal screen brief and absolute. When the ride ended, the man remained seated a moment too long. Then he stepped out, leaving the plastic bag behind. Elle looked at it in the mirror. Inside was a folded discharge paper and a photograph torn cleanly in half. Elle did not unfold it. He placed it beside the other remnants in the ashtray compartment. Dawn was approaching again, not with hope, but with inventory. At 5, the sky began to thin, though the light had no warmth in it. Elle drove toward the edge of town where the road widened and forgot its markings. The factories stood behind him now, their chimneys pale against the coming gray. In the windshield, the dust caught the first hint of morning, suspended like something undecided. He thought of the house he once shared, kitchen tiles cracked near the sink, a porch light that burned too long in winter. Memory did not arrive as pain. It came as detail. The way a coffee mug had chipped at the rim. The sound of a door closing softly because anger had already been spent. He had left before the arguments required new words. Leaving it felt clean. It had not been. The fuel gauge dipped lower. He watched it without urgency. A man learns to measure himself by small, reliable movements. The sweep of a needle, the steady hum of an engine that has not yet failed. He understood now that he had mistaken motion for change. The road did not absolve. It only extended. He parked at a 24-hour gas station. The coffee was bitter and too hot, steam rising into air that did not soften. A delivery truck idled nearby, its driver asleep against the steering wheel. Elle stood beside his car and let the cup warm his hands. There was no revelation in the hour before sunrise, only the physical certainty of fatigue. When he returned to the driver's seat, he adjusted the rearview mirror. His eyes met themselves lying steady, without accusation. Behind that reflection lay the empty back seat, carrying the night's fragments in its quiet. Elle started the engine and pulled back onto the road. Morning did not promise anything. It simply resumed. By 6, the town had color again, but only the reluctant kind. A washed-out blue settled over the rooftops and parking lots. School buses began to move, their yellow dulled by the cold light. Elle drove past a bakery that had just opened. The smell of bread reached the street and disappeared before it could mean comfort. The dispatcher's voice crackled once more. Early airport run. He turned toward the highway where billboards advertised lawyers and second chances in equal measure. At the curb stood a woman with a small suitcase, the handle repaired with tape. She wore a coat too thin for the season and held her phone as if it might still change its mind. She entered the back seat and gave him the airport terminal number. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. In the mirror, he saw that her eyes were not. She watched the town slide past the pawn shops, the gas stations, the church sign promising renewal at 10 a.m. She did not open the window like the other woman. She kept the air sealed, as if departure required containment. Halfway there, traffic slowed near the overpass. Morning commuters stared ahead with disciplined indifference. The woman asked how long it would take. Elle told her the truth in minutes. She nodded and pressed her lips together, as if agreeing to terms already signed. No one mentioned what she was leaving, or whether someone would be waiting at the gate. At the terminal, she paid without checking the fare. For a second, she remained seated, hands resting on the suitcase in her lap. In the mirror, their eyes met, not with appeal, but with recognition, the brief understanding between strangers, who know that staying and leaving are only variations of the same fatigue. Then she stepped out into the pale light. Elle watched her join the line of travelers, moving toward automatic doors that opened and closed without memory. The sky had fully brightened now. It illuminated the windshield, The dust, the thin cracks in the vinyl. He shifted into drive. Another call would come. The day, like the night, required nothing from him except continuation. 7 arrived without ceremony. The sun rose over the rusted stacks and turned them briefly gold, as if to mock their decay. Commuters filled the streets with controlled impatience. El moved among them, his Crown Victoria absorbed into the current. Daylight did not change the work. It only made it visible. A final call before he would consider stopping came from a strip mall where the windows were plastered with discount signs. An older man stood outside a tax office that had not yet opened. He carried no bag, only a folder pressed flat against his chest. When he entered the back seat, he gave an address across town and then added, almost as an afterthought, "No rush." They drove through neighborhoods where lawns were trimmed but never used. The man opened the folder once, glanced at the papers, and closed it again. In the mirror, Elle saw lips moving silently, rehearsing numbers that refused to align. Debt, he knew, was not always about money. It was a tether. Cut it, and a man drifted. Keep it, and he remained accountable to something, even if that something was merciless. At a red light, the sun struck the rearview mirror directly. For a moment, Elle could not see the passenger, only his own reflection layered over the faint outline of the man behind him. 2 faces occupying the same square of glass. He adjusted the angle slightly. The illusion dissolved, but the recognition did not. When they reached the address, a modest house with drawn curtains, the man lingered before opening the door. "Thank you," he said, as if gratitude were a formality required by daylight. Elle nodded. The door closed. The man walked toward the house without looking back. Elle remained at the curb until the figure disappeared inside. The morning had settled fully now. Children's voices carried from somewhere unseen. He checked the mirror once more. His eyes were tired but clear. The world had resumed its rotation, indifferent and exact. He pulled away, already part of it again. Blue note at dawn. The air inside the blue note did not move. The ceiling fan only rearranged the heat. Outside, the highway lay flat and gray, and the gas station neon flickered like a weak pulse that refused to stop. The room smelled of old carpet, bourbon, and damp wood. In Miller's glass, the last shard of ice turned clear and sharp before surrendering to water. It touched the side of the glass with a small, tired sound. A pile of crumpled receipts rested on the bar. Names and numbers bled into each other. The bartender polished the same glass without looking at it. Cloth against crystal made a dry whisper. At the far end, Hannah sat in a man's jacket that did not belong to her shoulders. She scraped old polish from her nail with slow precision. No one ordered another drink. There was still some left. Miller turned his glass on its coaster. The circle it made was steady, almost patient. His hand still carried the memory of oil. He lifted his eyes, not to speak, only to confirm that waiting was shared. Hannah adjusted her collar, a gesture meant for someone absent. In the ashtray, a cigarette burned alone, its ash lengthening toward collapse. His hand trembled once. The ice finished dissolving, and the liquid rose to the rim. A single drop slid over and rested on the wood. Hannah placed a napkin beneath it. "Too warm for ice," she said. "Too warm for anything," he answered. The silence that followed had weight. It pressed against the piano in the corner, against the stopped clock above it. Hannah stood and crossed the room. She wiped a line through the dust on the piano lid and pressed one key. The note was dull, imperfect, but it climbed to the ceiling and remained there. Miller closed his eyes and let it pass through him. When the door opened, pale dawn entered without promise. He left money on the bar, more than required. Outside, his old Ford waited under a fading sign. The engine turned over with effort. The word open went dark. The world did not notice. The highway had begun to pale, but the night still held the room. Dawn did not enter. It hovered outside the windows, like a witness unwilling to interfere. The neon from the gas station flickered one last time and steadied, as if exhausted by its own insistence. Inside the Blue Note, the air felt used. The melted ice in Miller's glass no longer remembered its shape. He remained seated after Hannah's note dissolved into the ceiling. The piano key slowly rose back into place with a soft mechanical sigh. The bartender stopped polishing and set the glass down. It made a small, final sound against the wood. No one spoke. Words would have required intention. Hannah returned to her stool, but did not sit. She looked at the pile of receipts and pressed her palm flat over them, as though testing for warmth. There was none. Miller watched her hand, the faint imprint it left in the thin dust. He understood the gesture. It was not about money. It was about proof that something had passed through here. The cigarette in the ashtray finally gave in. The column of ash bent and fell without ceremony. Miller stood. His knees protested, quietly. He reached for his jacket and paused, as if expecting a different weight in the pocket. There was only fabric and the dull outline of his wallet. Outside, the parking lot carried the color of wet steel. Hannah stepped through the door first again, holding it open a fraction too long. Miller followed. The sign behind them still read open, though no one remained inside. The morning did not feel new. It felt continued. The parking lot smelled of cooling asphalt and spilled fuel. The sky over the highway was no longer black, only thin and colorless. Miller stood beside his Ford without opening the door. The metal held the night's chill. Hannah walked a few steps ahead, then stopped near the edge of the lot where gravel met broken weeds. The Blue Note's windows reflected them poorly. Two figures without detail. The neon from the gas station had gone steady now, weak but persistent. Inside the club, the fan still turned. Its shadow moved across the ceiling like a slow blade. No one had switched it off. Hannah lit a cigarette and did not inhale. Smoke rose and thinned in the damp air. "You worked nights," she said, not looking at him. It was not a question. Miller nodded once. The motion felt heavier than it should. "They closed it," he answered. There was nothing else to add. A truck passed on the highway, loud and indifferent. A sound filled the space between them and left it larger. Hannah dropped the cigarette before it burned halfway and crushed it with her heel. The ember disappeared without resistance. She brushed her hands together, as if finishing a small task. Miller opened the Ford. The door creaked in a familiar way. He sat but did not start the engine. Hannah walked toward the road without turning back. The morning widened, pale and unfinished. The club sign flickered once behind him, then held its light. The engine coughed before it settled into a low, uneven hum. Miller kept both hands on the wheel, though the car was not moving. The windshield carried a thin film of moisture. It blurred the highway into a smear of pale gray. He wiped a narrow arc with his sleeve. The world did not sharpen much. Hannah had reached the shoulder of the road. She stood there as if waiting for a bus that no longer ran. A delivery truck slowed, then continued. Its tires hissed against the damp asphalt. She did not raise her hand. The cigarette pack remained folded in her palm, unexamined. Inside the Ford, the radio clicked when he turned the knob. Static. Then a fragment of early news factory numbers, weather warnings, a voice speaking about closures in a town that sounded like this one. He turned it off. The silence of the engine felt cleaner. He watched her through the windshield. She adjusted the oversized jacket again, the same movement from inside the club. A habit, not protection. For a moment, he considered stepping out, saying something practical. There was nothing practical to say. The sun edged higher, without warmth. The Blue Note sign finally went dark behind him. Miller shifted the car into gear. The tires rolled over gravel with a dry, grinding sound. As he pulled onto the highway, Hannah grew smaller in the mirror, then indistinct. The road accepted him without comment. The highway did not offer direction. It stretched forward in a pale, exhausted line. Miller drove without haste. The Ford vibrated at a steady pitch, a thin metal tremor that traveled through the steering wheel into his wrists. Fields lay flat on both sides, patched with frost and abandoned billboards that promised things no one believed anymore. He passed the factory exit without slowing. The sign still carried its name in faded blue letters. The parking lot beyond the fence was empty, marked only by oil stains that would outlast the building. He did not turn his head. The place had already removed him from its memory. At a red light near the edge of town, he stopped beside a school bus. The windows were dark. No children yet. His reflection floated faintly in the glass older than he expected, less defined. The light changed. Neither vehicle moved for a second, as if unsure the signal applied to them. He drove on until the town thinned into warehouses and open lots. At a small gas station, he pulled in. The pump handle was cold. He filled the tank without checking the price. The numbers climbed in silence. When he returned the handle, a drop of fuel slid down and darkened the concrete. Back in the car, he did not start the engine immediately. He looked at his hands resting on his knees. They were steady now. The ice had long since melted. He turned the key. The Ford answered. The road waited, wide and indifferent. Beyond the gas station, the town ended without announcement. The road narrowed and lost its paint. Miller drove with the window slightly open. Cold air entered and settled on his face. It carried the smell of wet soil and distant smoke. The engine's rhythm remained constant, almost patient. He turned off toward the river, out of habit. The gravel path was uneven, bordered by leafless trees that leaned toward the water. He parked where he had once come after late shifts. The river moved slowly, thick and brown, carrying fragments of branches and something metallic that caught the light for a second before sinking. He stepped out. The ground was soft under his boots. In the quiet, he could hear the ticking of the cooling engine. It sounded like a small clock, counting nothing. He walked to the edge and looked at the surface. It reflected the sky without depth. From his pocket, he removed a small factory badge, its numbers worn nearly smooth. He held it in his palm. It was lighter than he remembered. For a moment, he considered the distance between his hand and the water. Then he let it fall. The badge struck the surface without drama and disappeared. Miller stood there until the ripples flattened. The river resumed its indifferent movement. He returned to the Ford, started the engine, and pulled back onto the road. The day had fully arrived. It did not feel earned. Coffee gone cold. The diner beside Interstate 80 breathed damp air and cheap diesel. Ben sat at the counter and watched condensation slide down his glass as if it had somewhere to be. Outside, his Ford ambulance waited under the flickering neon. A white box with a red stripe, like an old wound held together by tape. A cigarette burned itself down in the ashtray. The radio hissed with distant static, almost like a sea he had never seen. Each shift began the same way. He ran his hand over the steering wheel, worn to gray in places. Oxygen tanks checked. Gauze restocked. A dark fleck of dried blood wiped from the corner of the floor. The city kept quiet, heavy and swollen, like air before a storm. When he pulled on rubber gloves, they squealed softly. The sound filled the cabin more completely than speech. He ordered a third coffee. Mara did not pour fresh. She nudged the old cup back toward him. Her apron carried a stain shaped like a ruined map. They did not speak. Words cost more than the night could afford. The coffee cooled faster than he drank it. Hours passed without a call. The digital clock on the dashboard dropped seconds like a blade. Ben looked at his hands. They were steady. The steadiness frightened him more than tremor. A former factory worker entered, bought cigarettes, and left. His eyes were already elsewhere. Somewhere beyond the highway, A train whistled without invitation. Ben stepped outside and opened the rear doors. Inside it was bright, sterile, empty. He sat on the stretcher and clipped the pulse monitor to his own finger. Numbers moved. He felt nothing. Near dawn, the radio cracked with a dry address. Ben started the engine. Blue light washed the wet asphalt, briefly beautiful, briefly false. There would be no promise in it, only the next signal. Rain began without conviction. It tapped against the windshield and then steadied, turning the neon sign into a trembling wound of color. Ben remained behind the wheel. The wipers moved in patient arcs, clearing the glass only to let the darkness return. Light, dark, light, dark. The rhythm was cleaner than thought. He drove without urgency through streets that had forgotten their purpose. Storefronts stood with boarded windows, their posters bleached to anonymity. Street lamps cut the cabin into measured intervals, illumination and shadow falling across his hands like a metronome. The city did not sleep. It held its breath. At a red light that did not matter, he stopped. The intersection was empty. He listened to the engine idle, to the faint ticking beneath the hood. Machines had a language that did not accuse. They required only maintenance. People required explanations. He parked near the bridge and stepped out. The river below moved black and slow, thick as oil. He lit a cigarette, cupping the flame against the damp wind. For a moment, the match burned brighter than it should have, sharp and chemical. The smell cut through moisture and diesel, clean and brief. He thought of the stretcher, of weight transferred, of hands pressing down on a chest that would not answer. He remembered the factory worker's eyes. The town was not dying loudly. It was thinning quietly, like breath on cold glass. When the radio finally broke the silence, the voice was stripped of inflection. An address, a number. Ben let the cigarette fall and crushed it beneath his heel. There was no surge of purpose, no tightening in his chest, only movement. He turned the key slightly, as if confirming what was already certain, and guided the ambulance back into the narrow corridor of wet light. The address led him to the edge of town, where the asphalt thinned and houses stood apart from one another like reluctant witnesses. A porch light flickered above a sagging door. Ben cut the siren before turning in. The engine idled once, then settled. Rain ticked softly against the hood. Inside, the air was stale with boiled cabbage and something metallic. A woman stood near the kitchen table, hands pressed together, as if warming them over an invisible fire. On the floor lay a man in a work shirt, one sleeve darker than the other. His boots were still laced. The television murmured to no one. Ben knelt. Routine arrived before feeling. 2 fingers to the neck, a glance at the pupils. The pulse monitor clipped in place, obedient and indifferent. The numbers climbed, then hesitated. Rubber gloves tightened over his wrists with a dry complaint. He began compressions. The floorboards answered with a dull rhythm. The woman did not cry. She watched his hands move up and down, as if he were fixing something simple. On the table, a cup of coffee had formed a thin skin. The refrigerator motor started and stopped. Time did not accelerate. It thickened. When the second unit arrived, their boots carried in wet leaves. Together, they lifted the man onto the stretcher. Metal locked with a clean, final click. Ben avoided the woman's eyes. There was nothing to promise her. Back in the ambulance, the interior light made the man's face look almost peaceful. Ben sat opposite him, listening to the steady electronic tone that pretended to be open. Outside, the town receded without resistance. The rain kept falling, patient and exact. The hospital entrance was lit too brightly for the hour. Automatic doors opened with a tired sigh. Ben and the second paramedic pushed the stretcher down a corridor that smelled of disinfectant and old sleep. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. The wheels rattled briefly over a seam in the linoleum, then found their rhythm again. In the emergency room, hands replaced his. Questions were asked in clipped tones. Time of collapse. Estimated downtime. Medication given. Ben answered without looking at the man's face. A nurse cut away the work shirt. The fabric fell aside like something already discarded. On the monitor, lines rose and fell with mechanical optimism. He stepped back when told to. The room filled with movement that had nothing to do with him anymore. Someone called for another dose. Someone counted. The numbers continued to arrive, precise and meaningless. Ben removed his gloves. They snapped softly as he pulled them free, turning inside out in his hands. He stood by the wall and watched the clock above the door. Seconds dropped cleanly, without hesitation. He felt neither urgency nor relief, only the weight of having been present. Outside the curtained space, a vending machine glowed in the dim hallway, its rows of candy untouched. When it was over, no one announced it loudly. The monitor flattened with a quiet decision. A sheet was drawn up with professional calm. Ben signed where he was told to sign. Ink pressed into paper, proof that something had occurred. Back in the ambulance bay, the rain had thinned to mist. He wiped the stretcher rails with slow, exact strokes, spirit and dust. The smell clung to his hands even after he washed them. Dawn waited somewhere beyond the low clouds, but it made no promise of warmth. Dawn arrived without color. The sky above the ambulance bay turned from black to a thin, exhausted gray. Ben leaned against the side of the vehicle and watched his breath dissolve in the damp air. The siren lights were off now. Without them, the ambulance looked smaller, almost civilian. A tool returned to storage. Inside, he replaced what had been used: fresh gauze, a sealed syringe. The oxygen gauge tapped once under his finger, obedient and full. He scrubbed a faint smear from the metal rail until it disappeared into brightness. Cleaning was simpler than remembering. Surfaces could be restored. The station was quiet when he returned. A vending machine hummed in the corner, patient as an animal that did not require attention. He poured himself coffee from a glass pot that had been standing since midnight. It was bitter and thin. He drank it anyway. Across from him sat a younger paramedic finishing his shift. The man spoke about moving to Denver, about a hospital job, about better hours. Ben nodded at the right moments. The words passed over him like traffic on the highway. Audible, distant, already gone. When the younger man left, the room widened. Ben sat alone with the ticking wall clock. Each second fell with measured certainty. He tried to imagine not coming back one night. The idea did not frighten him. It felt administrative. The radio remained silent. He rested his hands flat on the table, studying the faint tremor that appeared only when he was still. Movement hid it. Stillness revealed it. He understood then that the waiting was not between calls. The waiting was the work itself. Outside, a truck roared past on Interstate 80, carrying something toward somewhere else. Ben finished his coffee and stood. Another shift would begin soon. There was no reason in it, only continuation. By evening, the sky had lowered again, pressing its weight against the town. Ben returned to the diner out of habit rather than hunger. The neon sign flickered with the same uncertain pulse. Inside, Mara wiped the counter in slow, exact movements, as if polishing time itself. He took the same seat. The vinyl gave under his weight with a tired sigh. Mara placed a cup before him without asking. The coffee was already cooling. A small crack ran along the rim of the mug, fine as a healed scar. He traced it with his thumb and felt nothing. At the far end of the counter sat a young couple speaking in low voices. Their words carried urgency, plans, departure. A map lay unfolded between them, bright with routes that promised distance. Ben watched them without listening. He had once known that tone, the belief that motion could change the shape of a life. The radio on his belt remained silent. He adjusted it anyway, turning the volume up a fraction, then down. Static breathed softly, patient as tide against stone. He realized he feared the silence less than the interruption. Silence meant suspension. A call meant proof. When he stepped outside, the air tasted faintly of salt from the winter roads. The ambulance stood beneath the sign, its surface reflecting broken light. He rested his hand on the metal door. It was cold and solid, reliable in ways people were not. For a moment, he considered driving west, past the last exit, beyond the county line. The thought was clean and brief. Then it dissolved, replaced by routine. He opened the driver's door and sat behind the wheel. The engine turned over without hesitation. As he pulled back onto Interstate 80, streetlights cut across his face in measured intervals. Light, dark, light. The town receded in the mirrors, not resisting, not calling him back. The radio gave a short crackle, then fell quiet again. He drove on, carrying the waiting with him. Near midnight, the fog rolled in from the low fields and settled over the highway like a second skin. Ben slowed the ambulance without being told to. The beams cut a narrow corridor through the gray. Beyond it, nothing insisted on existing. A call came at last. A single-car accident passed the old grain silos. The voice on the radio was stripped of color. Coordinates, no adjectives. He answered with the same economy. The siren broke the fog into trembling fragments. Blue light turned the mist briefly luminous, then swallowed it again. The car had left the road without drama. It rested against a fence post, hood folded inward as if in quiet thought. A young man sat behind the wheel, eyes open, hands still on the steering column. The windshield carried a spiderweb of cracks. No blood at first glance, only stillness. Ben opened the door and felt the cold rush out. He touched the man's neck. Nothing answered. The pulse monitor confirmed what the silence already knew. Rubber gloves tightened over his skin. He checked again, methodical, exact. Fog gathered on his shoulders and did not move. A sheriff's cruiser idled nearby. Its headlights flattened the scene into something documentary. The sheriff spoke softly, as if volume could disturb what had already settled. Ben nodded. There was no urgency to summon, only procedure. They lifted the body onto the stretcher. Metal locked with a clean click. The young man's head tilted slightly, then came to rest. No one mentioned speed or alcohol or regret. The road offered no explanation. It had simply continued. As Ben closed the rear doors, he saw his reflection in the ambulance window, pale, divided by raindrops and light. For a moment, he did not recognize the face. Then the radio murmured again, already moving on. He climbed into the driver's seat and steered back into the fog, carrying weight that no instrument could measure. The fog did not lift by morning. It thinned only enough to reveal the outlines of buildings, as if the town had been sketched in pencil and left unfinished. Ben parked behind the hospital and cut the engine. The sudden silence pressed against his ears. Inside the rear compartment, the stretcher stood empty again. He wiped the rails with slow, practiced movements. A strand of the young man's hair clung to the fabric strap. Ben removed it carefully and let it fall to the floor before sweeping it away. Spirit and cloth, motion and erasure. In the locker room, he changed his shirt. The fabric against his skin felt foreign, as if borrowed. In the mirror, fluorescent light flattened his face into planes and shadow. He studied his eyes, searching for some visible alteration. There was none. Fatigue had the courtesy of looking ordinary. He stepped outside and walked without direction. Storefront windows reflected him back in fragments. A bakery sign hung crooked above a locked door. A dog barked somewhere behind a fence, then stopped abruptly, as if reminded of the hour. At the bridge he paused. The river moved thick and dark below, unchanged by sirens or silence. He lit a cigarette and watched the smoke dissolve into mist. The match burned down to his fingers before he felt the heat. He understood then that the night had not been exceptional. It had been typical. The accident would settle into paperwork. The factory worker would return to his porch. Mara would wipe the counter again. Nothing in the town required transformation. When the radio cracked once more, he did not look at it immediately. He let it speak twice before answering. His voice was steady, almost distant. There was no defiance in him, no hope either. Only continuation, a road extending into fog, waiting for the next signal to give it shape. The next call came from the outskirts, where the houses thinned into trailers and scrapyards. A child with a fever, the dispatcher said, breathing irregular. The words arrived dry and measured, as if describing weather. Ben drove without the siren this time. The road was empty enough. Gravel cracked under the tires as he pulled beside a trailer with a single light burning in the kitchen. The porch steps sagged in the middle. He carried the bag in one hand and knocked once before entering. Inside, heat pressed against him. A small boy lay on a couch beneath a blanket patterned with faded animals. His mother stood nearby, arms folded tightly across her chest. The air smelled of fried onions and anxiety. A fan rotated in slow circles, stirring nothing. Ben knelt and placed 2 fingers against the child's wrist. The pulse was quick-thin. He listened to the chest with the stethoscope, metal cool against warm skin. The boy's eyes opened briefly, unfocused, then closed again. Ben spoke quietly, not to comfort, but to mark procedure. He prepared the oxygen mask. The elastic band snapped softly as he stretched it into place. The mother watched every movement as if memorizing a ritual she might need later. There was no blood, no broken metal, only heat and shallow breaths. They transported him without urgency, but without delay. The stretcher seemed too large for such a small body. Inside the ambulance, the monitor beeped with fragile insistence. Numbers rose and fell. Ben adjusted the flow, checked again, adjusted once more. Precision against uncertainty. As they neared the hospital, the child's breathing steadied, almost imperceptibly. The mother exhaled for the first time since they had arrived. Ben did not share the relief. He had seen recoveries turn without warning. Stability was temporary. When the doors opened at the emergency entrance, he lifted the stretcher out with careful hands. The morning light was thin and colorless. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, a train sounded its distant horn. It did not summon anyone. It only confirmed that distance still existed. By the 10th night, the pattern had hardened into something almost visible. Ben no longer measured time in hours, but in intervals between signals. The station clock ticked with surgical precision. He sat alone at the metal table, hands folded, listening to the quiet hum of electricity in the walls. Mara closed the diner early that evening. He had watched her switch off the neon, the red stripe fading from the ambulance's side. For a moment, the vehicle looked anonymous, like any delivery truck, without light, even purpose dimmed. The radio remained silent. Not the expectant silence of earlier nights. This one felt settled, conclusive. Ben stepped outside and stood beside the ambulance. The metal held the cold of accumulated hours. He pressed his palm against it as if confirming its presence. He thought of the factory worker, the young man in the fog, the child beneath the faded blanket. None of them occupied his mind fully. They appeared as fragments, a cracked windshield, a pulse line flattening, the smell of fevered skin. Details without narrative. When the call finally came, it was distant. Another county mutual aid, a long drive across open highway. He acknowledged it with a voice that carried no inflection. The engine started cleanly. Blue lights flared against the station walls, briefly transforming concrete into something theatrical. As he merged onto Interstate 80, the road opened ahead in a straight, indifferent line. There would be no revelation at its end, only another address, another body, another room thick with waiting. Ben understood this with calm clarity. He did not seek meaning in it anymore. The radio crackled once and steadied into direction. He drove toward it without haste. In the rearview mirror, the town receded into a blur of dim lamps and closed windows. The night did not resist him. It simply absorbed him, as it had done before and would do again. No address ahead. The cold lived inside the old Ford as if it had rented the upholstery years ago and never moved out. Oscar sat without touching the wheel, letting the engine idle until it could pretend to be warm. The dashboard threw a weak green light onto his hands that looked permanent, like tools left on a workbench after the shop closed. Outside, the town was still gray from sleep. Factory stacks stood at the edge of it, like monuments to something that had died without a ceremony. The Shell station by the highway was already awake in the way places are awake when they do not need feelings. Numbers spun on the pump faster than his eyes wanted to follow. The air smelled of gasoline and wet asphalt. He bought coffee in a thin plastic cup. It was black, bitter, too hot, and he held it with both hands until the heat started to soften the rim. Behind the glass, the cashier counted change with mechanical patience, her eyes fixed on a small TV in the corner where old news moved its mouth and said nothing new. Nebraska opened up as a wide, dirty sheet pulled tight to the horizon. The road was so straight, it took almost no skill, only the stubbornness to keep a line. Oscar watched the power poles melt into the distance. Each one felt like a second scratched out. There was no nostalgia in it, only the knowledge that the land was large enough for a man to disappear without ever turning off course, large enough to hide you in plain daylight. He tried the radio out of habit and found only static between stations. The sound was like sand poured into a metal bucket. He left it there. It filled the cab the way cheap insulation fills a wall enough to keep something from getting in. The crackle was safe. It asked him nothing. It did not pronounce his name the way a voice could, and it did not drag the past by the collar into the present. At the Chrome Diner, the chrome had dulled under years of grease, and the vinyl booths wore pale splits like scars that had stopped bleeding long ago. Oscar ordered the lunch special and barely touched it. At the next table, an old man stirred sugar into his cup with a slow, solemn care, as if the gesture had once meant something, and he refused to let it become pointless. The spoon clicked against the rim, small, clean, and sharp in the provincial quiet. Oscar listened too long. The sound did not comfort him. It only reminded him that there used to be rooms where mornings belonged to someone. Outside again, he pulled over by the shoulder to smoke and noticed a new rust spot on the fender. He touched it with his fingertip. The metal gave a little crumbling like a dry biscuit. It was the honest work of time. The car was dying with him, slowly, without drama, and the thought brought a strange calm. Everything with weight turns dust eventually. He watched the ash fall onto his boot, and he did not brush it away. Rain began without warning, a heavy Midwestern rain that did not fall so much as descend. The wipers moved in a steady arc left, right, left measured, and obedient. Water blurred the fields into a gray watercolor, erasing fences, trees, even the horizon. Oscar preferred it this way. When the world lost its edges, it stopped demanding decisions. He could drive through a softened landscape and pretend that nothing required his return. He passed a town whose main factory had been closed long enough for weeds to claim the parking lot. The sign still hung above the gate, letters faded but stubborn. On the main street, paper and dust circled in small, tired spirals. A general store leaned slightly forward, as if listening for customers who would never come. Oscar slowed without meaning to. In the boarded windows, he saw not reflections, but a version of himself that had once believed in staying. He pressed the pedal again, not to escape, only to avoid lingering where everything had already been decided. Evening arrived in a dark blue sweep. The neon above the Blue Moon Motel flickered. The M failed to glow, leaving only blue, suspended in the dusk. Gravel crunched under his boots when he stepped out. The air carried the smell of damp grass and old tires. He stood for a moment beside the Ford, listening to the ticking of its cooling engine. The sound was intimate, like a tired animal settling down. Room 12 was colder than the outside. The bed sagged in the middle with the resignation of long use. On the wall hung a cheap print of mountains that did not belong to this state, sharp peaks rising above an impossible lake. Oscar sat and removed his boots. His feet bore the imprint of pedals, a memory pressed into bone. He did not feel like a traveler. He felt like a man who kept moving because stopping would mean sinking through the thin floor of himself. In the narrow corridor, he met a woman carrying a stack of towels. Her robe was washed to a color that no longer had a name. They stepped aside for each other in silence, bodies turning with automatic courtesy. Their eyes met for less than a second. It was enough. There was no curiosity in the look, only recognition. The quiet agreement of two people who had already counted their losses and found nothing left to argue about. He opened a can of stew with the small folding knife he kept in the glove compartment. The lid bent back with a dull metallic sigh. Oscar ate it cold, sitting on the edge of the bed, the can resting in his palm like a tool. The taste was flat, salted into obedience. He chewed slowly, counting the bites without meaning to. Above him, a stain on the ceiling spread in the shape of a continent that did not exist. It looked like a face if he stared long enough. He stopped staring. Outside, near the office, a payphone stood beneath a weak bulb. The glass booth was scratched and clouded, as if too many hands had tried to leave something behind on it. Oscar stepped into the night and lifted the receiver. There was only wind moving through distant wires. He held it to his ear anyway. His fingers hovered over the metal buttons. He realized he did not know a number he wished to dial. Freedom, he thought, is only the absence of witnesses. He put the receiver back carefully, as if it might break from disappointment. He leaned against the motel wall and struck a match. For a moment, the flame illuminated his face-deep lines around the mouth, eyes dulled by too many miles of asphalt. The cigarette steadied between his fingers. Smoke rose straight upward. The wind had grown tired. Ash gathered and fell onto his boot. He watched it collect there without brushing it away. Everything that burns leaves something behind. It is rarely useful. Lying on top of the blanket, he listened to the highway. Trucks moved in the distance, their engines howling low and constant, like wounded animals refusing to lie down. Headlights slid across the ceiling and disappeared. Each beam was a brief visitation. None of them stopped. Oscar did not expect them to. The world passed by with disciplined indifference. He closed his eyes not to dream, but to power down, like a machine that has served its shift. Sometime near midnight, a locomotive sounded from beyond the dark fields. The horn stretched long and hollow, vibrating through the walls and into his ribs. He opened his eyes. The train was heading somewhere precise. Guided by rails it did not question. Oscar listened until the sound thinned into silence. Direction, he understood, did not guarantee arrival. Movement was enough. In the dark, he turned onto his side and waited for sleep to take him without asking why. He woke before the alarm on his cheap watch had a chance to tremble. The room was still dark, but the dark had thinned. For a moment, he did not remember where he was. Then the sag in the mattress explained it. A memory moved through him without permission. A kitchen table, early light, a woman's hands cutting bread on a wooden board. Flour dusted her wrists. He could not recall her name. Only the rhythm of the knife and the quiet certainty that mornings once belonged to both of them. The image dissolved before he could hold it. What remained was the sensation of crumbs against his palms. In the bathroom, the water ran thin and cold. He bent over the sink and splashed his face until his skin stung. The mirror offered him a stranger with red eyes and a mouth that had forgotten how to rest. He shaved without foam. The blade scraped across his jaw with a small, honest pain. He welcomed it. Physical discomfort was clear. It did not argue or accuse. It simply existed, and that was enough. Outside, the gravel was damp with dawn. A pale mist clung low to the ground, refusing to rise. Oscar carried his key to the office and placed it on the counter. The old man behind the glass did not look up from his newspaper. Pages turned with a dry whisper. No farewell was exchanged. Transactions were simpler than goodbyes. The Ford waited with a skin of dew across the windshield. Oscar wiped a broad arc clear with his sleeve, leaving streaks behind. The engine turned over at the first attempt. He listened to its steady idle as if it were a pulse. For a second, he allowed himself to sit without shifting into gear. There was no destination written anywhere, only distance measured in miles and fuel. He pulled onto the highway as the sun rose directly ahead. The light did not warm. It only blinded. Fields stretched out on both sides, patient and indifferent. 500 more miles to another room with a number on the door. Oscar adjusted his grip on the wheel. He was not chasing anything, and nothing followed. The only rule of his exile was simple: keep the engine running. By mid-morning, the rain had returned, not violently, but with persistence. It settled over the plains like a decision already made. The wipers resumed their measured labor left, right, left, cutting brief corridors of clarity through the water. Oscar kept his eyes on the narrow strip of road that revealed itself and vanished again. Visibility had become a form of mercy. When the world blurred, it asked less of him. He stopped at a roadside turnout where the asphalt surrendered to mud. The fields beyond were soaked and dark, the soil opened like a wound. He stepped out and stood beside the Ford, letting the rain settle on his jacket. A new patch of rust had bloomed along the rear fender, thin and reddish, spreading quietly. He pressed it with his thumb. The metal flaked without protest. Time did not hurry. It simply continued. Back inside, the cab smelled of damp fabric and old tobacco. He turned the radio dial again, slowly, as if tuning required patience rather than luck. Between two stations, a faint voice tried to exist a fragment of a song, then nothing. Static reclaimed the space. He left it there. The noise filled the silence without entering it. Around noon, he passed a grain elevator standing alone against the sky, its concrete sides stained by decades of weather. No trucks waited beneath it. No men moved along its base. The structure looked unnecessary now, too large for the land that surrounded it. Oscar watched it shrink in his rearview mirror until it became another vertical line on the horizon. Buildings, like people, outlived their purpose more often than they admitted. The highway bent slightly for the first time in hours. It was not a real curve, only a suggestion of one. Oscar followed it without thinking. The sun pushed weakly through the clouds, turning the wet pavement into a dull mirror. He drove into that pale reflection, neither hopeful nor afraid. Motion was no longer an escape. It was maintenance, the steady act of keeping himself from settling into a place that would close over him like water. Toward afternoon, the clouds thinned, leaving the sky the color of cooled ash. The road sign announced a county line he did not feel crossing. Oscar drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the door where the paint had worn smooth from years of contact. The land rolled slightly here, enough to break the illusion of endless flatness. Farmhouses appeared at measured distances, each surrounded by wind-leaning trees and machinery left to weather in place. Nothing invited him in. Nothing resisted him either. He stopped at a small grocery with a faded Pepsi sign in the window. Inside, the air carried the smell of cardboard and refrigeration. He bought a bottle of water and a pack of cigarettes. The cashier, a boy not yet old enough to look tired, asked if he needed a receipt. Oscar shook his head. Transactions without paper felt lighter. Outside, he stood by the hood and drank half the bottle in slow swallows. Water had no memory. It did not remind him of anything. Back on the highway, the afternoon light sharpened. The fields turned from gray to a dull green, as if someone had adjusted a setting behind the sky. He noticed the lines in his hands more clearly now. They looked permanent, like cracks in dry earth. For a moment, he wondered what would happen if he simply missed a turn, let the tank run empty, allowed the engine to fall silent. The thought did not frighten him. It simply existed, like an object placed on a table. Near evening, he passed a cemetery set back from the road, its stone small and uniform. A flag moved weakly above the entrance. He did not slow. The dead were organized there, given names and dates. He had chosen something less defined. A life measured in miles did not require a plot of ground. It required only fuel and the willingness to continue. As dusk approached again, the sky lowered. Headlights began to appear in the opposite lane, each pair bright and brief. They moved toward him, then away, carrying unknown lives in sealed cabins. Oscar kept his course steady. He was not searching for meaning in the oncoming glare. He was maintaining direction. The engine hummed beneath him, faithful and indifferent. That was enough for another night. Night settled without ceremony. The sky did not darken all at once. It surrendered in layers. Oscar drove with the headlights, cutting a narrow tunnel through the black. Beyond that tunnel, there was nothing he needed to see. The engine kept its steady tone, neither strained nor eager. He watched the fuel gauge more often than the road. It was the only measure that still felt precise. A rest area appeared without warning, a dim rectangle of light set back from the highway. He signaled out of habit, though no one followed. The parking lot held 3 trucks and a sedan with fogged windows. Inside the restroom, the fluorescent lights hummed with a tired insistence. Water dripped from a faucet that would not close completely. Oscar washed his hands and dried them on paper thinner than tissue. In the mirror, his reflection waited for instruction. He gave it none. Outside, he sat on a concrete bench and lit a cigarette. The air carried the scent of diesel and cut grass. A truck driver stood a few meters away, speaking quietly into his phone. Oscar did not listen to the words, only to the cadence. It sounded like someone reporting that he would be late. The driver ended the call and remained still for a moment, as if waiting for an answer that had already been given. Back in the Ford, Oscar adjusted the seat a fraction lower. The small movement felt significant. He rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel before straightening again. Fatigue pressed behind his eyes, not traumatic, just constant. He considered sleeping there, engine off, windows cracked. Instead, he turned the key. The motor responded without hesitation. He merged onto the highway and allowed the darkness to take its place around him. The road signs reflected briefly in his lights and then withdrew. Somewhere ahead, there would be another motel, another room with a number, another morning without address. Oscar did not accelerate. He maintained his speed as if it were a promise made long ago and never revised. The next town announced itself with a flickering traffic light suspended over an empty intersection. Oscar slowed, though there was no cross traffic. Storefronts lined the main street in a row of tired brick. Half the windows were dark. The others held fluorescent light that flattened everything inside shelves, counters, a lone figure moving between aisles. He drove through without turning his head. A town like this did not need to be examined. It explained itself. At the edge of it stood a bar with a hand-painted sign, open. He pulled in, not out of thirst, but because the parking lot offered stillness. Inside, the air was heavy with stale beer and cleaning solution. A jukebox glowed in one corner, its lights steady but unused. He ordered a whiskey and left it mostly untouched. The bartender wiped the counter in slow circles, as if polishing memory rather than wood. 2 men played pool without speaking. The balls struck each other with small, controlled violence. Oscar watched the white cue ball travel across green felt and settle. The sound of impact echoed longer than it should have. He recognized in their silence the same agreement he carried in his own chest. No explanations were necessary. Loss had become common language. He left money on the counter and stepped back into the night. The traffic light blinked from green to yellow to red for no one. His boots sounded louder on the pavement than inside the bar. The Ford waited under a street lamp, paint dulled, chrome faintly catching the light. He ran his hand along the hood, not affectionately, but with acknowledgement. When he returned to the highway, the darkness felt deeper. The brief interruption had changed nothing. The road accepted him again without question. He adjusted the rearview mirror and saw only the thin thread of lights behind him. Whatever the town had been, it was already reduced to distance. He drove on, steady and unremarked, as if he had never left the line at all. The motel appeared after midnight, low and stretched thin along the service road. Its sign buzzed softly, one letter dimmer than the rest, as if conserving strength. Oscar pulled in and shut off the engine. The sudden silence pressed against his ears. For a moment he stayed seated, hands resting on his thighs, letting the stillness finish its sentence. The hood ticked as it cooled. He listened until the sound faded, until there was nothing left to acknowledge him. The room smelled of disinfectant and something older beneath it. The carpet had been cleaned too many times and never enough. He placed his bag by the wall and sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. Outside, a truck passed on the highway, its sound drawn out and heavy, like breath pushed through damaged lungs. The vibration moved through the walls and into the floor. Oscar felt it in his feet. He lay back and stared at the ceiling. A crack ran from the corner toward the center, branching once before stopping. He followed it with his eyes, then followed it again, as if repetition might give it meaning. He thought of nothing in particular. Thoughts had learned to keep their distance. They waited at the edges, respectful, like strangers who had heard enough already. Sleep did not come quickly. It rarely did. His body rested without surrendering. Somewhere nearby, a door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed the lot and faded. Life moved past the room without entering it. Oscar accepted that as a form of order. There were places meant only for passing through, and he had become one of them. When he finally slept, it was shallow and without images. No dreams arrived to bargain with him. He woke once, then again, each time unsure why. By morning, he would be ready to leave without resentment. Rest, like everything else now, was provisional. Dawn entered the room cautiously, slipping past the curtains in a thin gray line. Oscar was already awake. He lay still, listening to the faint hum of electricity in the walls. The night had left no trace behind, except a stiffness in his back. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of himself settle into his feet. Another room, another morning without explanation. He washed at the sink. The water coughed before it flowed. In the mirror, his face appeared flatter in the early light, as if time had pressed it between pages. He shaved with slow, careful strokes. A small cut opened near his chin. He watched a bead of blood form and then wiped it away. The sting was brief and exact. It belonged to the present, not to memory. Outside, the air carried the smell of wet gravel and distant exhaust. He returned the key to the office slot without knocking. The clerk behind the counter read a newspaper with yesterday's date. Neither of them spoke. Oscar stepped back into the parking lot and paused beside the Ford. Dew traced pale lines across the windshield. He cleared a space with his sleeve, leaving streaks like erased handwriting. The engine started on the first turn. He kept his foot on the brake a moment longer than necessary, watching the empty road ahead. There were miles waiting, already laid out and indifferent. He shifted into gear and rolled forward. The tires met the highway with a soft, steady sound. As the sun rose, it did not warm the fields. It illuminated them without comfort. Oscar drove into that light, neither expecting arrival nor fearing it. The day would repeat itself in altered shapes: fuel, coffee, distance, a room with a number. He did not question the pattern. He maintained it. The engine held its rhythm, and he held his course. The morning stretched thin and pale as he crossed into another state whose name he barely registered. A green sign announced it, then slipped behind him without consequence. Oscar drove with the window lowered a few inches. Cold air entered the cab and moved across his face with impersonal care. It carried the scent of soil and distant livestock. He inhaled once, deeply, as if testing whether anything in the air belonged to him. It did not. Near noon, he pulled into a small repair shop set back from the highway. The building leaned slightly, its paint blistered by years of weather. A man in oil-stained coveralls looked up from beneath the hood of a pickup. Oscar asked him to check the tire pressure. The mechanic nodded without curiosity. They stood side by side while the compressor hissed and the gauge clicked into place. Numbers were read. Adjustments were made. Payment changed hands. No advice was offered. Machines required maintenance. So did men, though less openly. Back on the road, he noticed the steering felt marginally steadier. The difference was almost imaginary, but he accepted it. Improvement did not need to be dramatic to matter. He passed a field where wind moved through tall grass in slow, coordinated waves. For a moment, the land appeared alive, breathing as one surface. Then the effect dissolved. The field returned to stillness, indifferent to observation. In the afternoon, he stopped at a roadside fruit stand, just a wooden table beneath a canopy. Apples lay in uneven rows. An elderly woman sat behind them, knitting something gray and formless. Oscar bought 2 apples and placed them on the passenger seat. He did not eat them immediately. Their presence felt deliberate, as if carrying them implied intention. He drove on with the fruit resting beside him like a quiet promise he had not agreed to keep. As evening approached, the sky shifted toward a deeper blue. Shadows lengthened across the pavement. He picked up one of the apples at last and bit into it while driving. The sound was sharp inside the cab. Juice ran across his fingers. The taste was clean and uncomplicated. He chewed slowly, staring ahead. It was not pleasure. It was sustenance. He swallowed and kept the wheel steady. By late afternoon, the wind picked up, pushing against the Ford in steady crosscurrents. The steering wheel required small corrections now, constant and precise. Oscar did not resent the effort. Resistance gave the road texture. Without it, the miles blurred into something abstract. He kept both hands on the wheel, feeling the slight tremor of motion pass through his palms and into his arms. Clouds gathered again, lower this time, pressing the sky closer to the fields. He passed a stretch of abandoned billboards, their advertisements peeled away by years of weather. Only fragments of slogans remained: half a word, a faded smile, a phone number without an area code. They faced the highway with blind persistence. Oscar glanced at them briefly. Promises endured longer than belief. Near dusk, he turned off at a rest stop, marked only by a small blue sign. The parking area was nearly empty. He cut the engine and listened to the sudden absence of vibration. Silence was never complete. It carried insects, distant traffic, the soft ticking of cooling metal. He stepped out and walked a short distance toward a fence that separated pavement from open land. Beyond it, the fields darkened in gradual layers. He ate the second apple standing there, chewing slowly, watching the horizon lose definition. Juice mixed with the dust on his fingers. When he finished, he dropped the core into a trash bin and wiped his hands on his jeans. The act felt practical, final. Nothing wasted, nothing saved. Back in the driver's seat, he did not start the engine immediately. He sat with his hands resting loosely in his lap. The idea of remaining there for the night crossed his mind, not as a solution, but as an option. He considered it with the same neutrality he applied to fuel stops and motel signs. After a minute, he turned the key. The motor answered without hesitation. He pulled back onto the highway as darkness completed its work, carrying him forward in the same measured line. The highway narrowed after midnight, the lanes tightening as if the land had grown impatient. Construction cones stood in uneven rows, their reflective bands catching his headlights and releasing them again. Oscar reduced his speed without thinking. The world had become a corridor of orange and white, controlled and temporary. Even detours followed a design. He drove past a stretch where fresh asphalt met the old road in a darker scene. The tires hummed differently over it. The change in sound was subtle but undeniable. He listened to it the way a mechanic listens for imbalance. Beneath him, layers of repair held the surface together. Nothing remained untouched for long. Maintenance was the only form of permanence. A patrol car stood on the shoulder, with its lights extinguished. The silhouette was visible only at the last second. Oscar kept his speed steady and his eyes forward. For a brief moment he felt observed, measured, then released. Authority did not pursue him. There was nothing to question in a man who stayed within the lines. Beyond the construction zone, the road opened again. Fields lay in darkness on both sides, indistinguishable from the sky. He rolled the window down an inch and let the cold air in. It kept him alert without comforting him. Somewhere in the distance, lightning flickered silently behind thick clouds. The light appeared and vanished without sound, a private storm unfolding beyond his reach. He drove until fatigue pressed at the edges of his vision. The fuel gauge dropped a fraction lower. He calculated the remaining miles without urgency. There would be another station ahead, another lit rectangle against the black. Oscar adjusted his grip on the wheel. He did not search for signs of meaning in the night. He kept his line steady and allowed the darkness to accompany him, neither friend nor threat. Sometime before dawn, the rain returned again, finer now, almost deliberate. It settled on the windshield in a thin veil that required only the lowest setting of the wipers. Oscar watched the droplets gather and separate, merge and disappear. The rhythm was slower this time. The night had exhausted itself. A truck stop emerged ahead, wide and bright against the fading dark. Rows of parked semis stood in disciplined lines, engines idling, cabs glowing faintly from within. He pulled in between two trailers, painted with company names that promised delivery and speed. The Ford looked smaller there, older, but it did not complain. He shut off the engine and sat still, listening to the layered hum of machinery around him. Inside the truck stop, fluorescent light flattened everything. Coffee machines hissed. A television above the counter displayed a weather map filled with shifting colors. No one seemed to be watching it. Men in heavy boots moved slowly between tables, eating without conversation. Oscar poured himself a cup of coffee and stood near the window. Outside, the sky lightened by degrees, revealing the long shapes of trailers and wet pavement. He took his coffee back to the car and drank it before starting the engine. The bitterness was familiar now, almost neutral. Dawn revealed the plain fields beyond the parking lot, washed pale by rain. He checked the fuel, adjusted the mirrors, and placed both hands on the wheel. Around him, other engines turned over in sequence, one after another, as if responding to an unheard signal. When he pulled back onto the highway, he joined the slow procession of trucks moving east. Their red lights blinked in measured intervals ahead of him. He followed at a distance, neither leading nor falling behind. The day began without declaration. Oscar maintained his speed, allowing the road to extend forward in quiet obedience. The convoy of trucks thinned as the morning advanced. One by one they exited toward distribution centers and industrial parks, leaving Oscar alone again in his narrow lane. The sky cleared to a hard, colorless blue. Sunlight struck the wet pavement and turned it into a dull sheet of glare. He lowered the visor and kept driving. A bridge carried him over a wide, brown river moving with patient force. He glanced down briefly. The water did not hesitate around its bends. It accepted debris without protest and carried it onward. For a moment, he imagined the ford slipping from the guardrail and joining that current. The image arrived without drama and left the same way. He tightened his grip slightly and continued across. On the far side of the river, the land shifted. Grain silos rose in clusters near the tracks, tall and cylindrical, their surfaces streaked with rust and rain. A freight train moved slowly parallel to the highway, cars linked in rigid order. Oscar matched its speed for a few miles. He watched the metal wheels turn, steady and inevitable. The train had a destination printed in paperwork somewhere. He did not. He stopped at a small service station to refuel. The pump handle was cold despite the sun. Numbers climbed again, precise and indifferent. He calculated the cost automatically, subtracting it from a balance he carried in his head. Money was not abundant, but it was sufficient. Sufficient had become his standard for everything. Back on the road, he noticed the engine's hum had changed slightly, a deeper note at higher speed. He listened carefully, trying to decide whether it signaled trouble or only age. Machines spoke in variations, not in sentences. He accepted the sound as long as it remained consistent. Consistency was enough. He adjusted the rearview mirror, saw only the shrinking station behind him, and returned his eyes to the line ahead. By early afternoon, the heat settled over the highway with a quiet insistence. The rain had dried from the asphalt, leaving faint white traces along the edges of the lane. Oscar drove with the window cracked open again. Warm air moved through the cab, carrying the scent of cut hay and distant machinery. The landscape felt heavier now, less forgiving. He noticed the temperature gauge inch slightly higher than usual. Not alarming, just enough to be observed. He eased his foot from the accelerator and let the engine breathe. The Ford responded without protest. For several miles, he listened only to the motor, measuring its rhythm against memory. Heat tested everything. It revealed weaknesses that cold had concealed. A long incline rose ahead, gradual but unending. Trucks in the right lane slowed visibly as they climbed. Oscar stayed in line with them, accepting the reduced pace. The engine deepened in tone, working without complaint. He watched the hood tremble faintly at higher revolutions. Effort was visible here, not hidden. At the crest of the hill, the land opened into a wide valley scattered with fields and small industrial buildings. From this height, the road seemed temporary, a thin gray ribbon laid across something older and more patient. He eased the Ford down the other side without using the brakes. The descent required less effort. Gravity did part of the work. Near the bottom, he pulled into a shaded turnout beneath a cluster of cottonwoods. He shut off the engine and let the sudden quiet settle. Heat rose from the hood in soft waves. He stepped out and opened it carefully. The engine block ticked and released its stored warmth into the air. Nothing smoked. Nothing failed. He stood there a moment longer than necessary, observing. When he closed the hood, he did it gently, as if concluding a conversation. Then he returned to the driver's seat and turned the key again. Late in the afternoon, the sky began to gather weight again, not with rain this time, but with a low metallic haze. The sun lost its edge and turned pale, as if seen through old glass. Oscar drove with the headlights on despite the hour. It felt practical, not cautious. The road ahead appeared flatter, drained of contrast. He passed a cluster of abandoned farm equipment near a broken fence. The machines stood tilted in dry grass, their paint eaten away by seasons. Once they had moved soil, cut grain shaped the land. Now they marked time instead of work. Oscar slowed slightly, studying their stillness. Metal did not disappear. It only surrendered its function. Further on, a small church appeared beside the highway. White paint chipped, a modest steeple pointing upward with tired certainty. The parking lot was empty. A sign out front listed service times in fading black letters. He did not turn in. Faith required repetition of a different kind. His own ritual was simpler fuel, distance, rest, and departure. As evening approached, the wind shifted and pushed at the car's side panels. The steering grew lighter for a moment, then steadier. He kept both hands in place, adjusting without conscious thought. The Ford answered his corrections with small mechanical honesty. There was no rebellion in it, only compliance. When darkness returned, it did so cleanly. No rain, no haze. Just a wide black sky pricked with faint stars. Oscar drove beneath them without looking up for long. The night was not meant for interpretation. It existed above him, the way the highway existed beneath him, constant, indifferent, unjudging. He maintained his speed and let the miles accumulate in silence. Near midnight, the highway curved around a reservoir he had not expected. Water lay dark and wide beside the road, holding the faint reflection of distant lights. Oscar reduced his speed without deciding to. The surface of the reservoir did not move. It looked solid from a distance, like polished stone. He kept his eyes forward. A narrow pier extended from the shore into the water, lit by a single sodium lamp. He considered turning off, then did not. Stillness beside water had a way of expanding. He understood that instinctively. Some places did not need to be entered to be felt. He remained in his lane and allowed the image to pass into the rearview mirror. The fuel gauge dropped closer to a quarter tank. He noted it without anxiety. Calculation replaced emotion. There was a station marked ahead on a small reflective sign. He adjusted his speed slightly, preserving distance with methodical restraint. Control, however limited, was maintained in these small acts. Beyond the reservoir, the land rose again. The road climbed gently, bordered by guardrails that caught his headlights and returned them in brief flashes. The engine's tone shifted with the incline, but held steady. He listened as if monitoring a pulse through fabric. No irregularity presented itself. At the crest, the horizon widened once more into open dark. A faint line of lights marked another town waiting ahead. Oscar did not assign it character. It would contain what the others had contained: rooms, counters, fuel pumps, transactions. He kept the wheels centered and descended toward it with the same measured intent that had carried him through every mile before. The town received him without ceremony. A strip of businesses lined the access road: fast food, a pharmacy, a motel with an illuminated vacancy sign. The lights were bright, but unwelcoming, designed for clarity rather than comfort. Oscar exited the highway and followed the service road at reduced speed. Traffic moved lightly in both directions, each vehicle sealed in its own interior silence. He stopped at the gas station first. The canopy lights reflected sharply off the Ford's worn paint. He filled the tank and watched the numbers climb until they stopped on a clean, even figure. The click of the pump handle echoed briefly. Inside, he paid in cash. The cashier glanced at him only long enough to confirm the amount. No questions were asked. He preferred it that way. From there, he drove to the motel at the edge of the strip. The building was newer than most he had seen, its exterior recently painted in neutral colors. At the reception desk, a young clerk typed his information into a computer without looking up. A plastic key card replaced the old metal key. Oscar accepted it and walked down a well-lit corridor that smelled faintly of detergent and carpet glue. The room was uniform bed aligned with the television, framed print above the headboard, climate control humming softly. He set his bag down and closed the door. The quiet was immediate and complete. He removed his shoes and sat at the edge of the bed, examining the faint crease lines pressed into the mattress from prior guests. Everything here was temporary by design. Later, lying flat on his back, he watched the red digits of the clock beside the bed advance minute by minute. Outside, occasional traffic passed along the service road, tires whispering over asphalt. He did not turn on the television. The ceiling remained blank and even. Another stop secured, another segment completed. He closed his eyes without expectation and allowed the night to proceed without him. Morning arrived clean and almost silent. The motel curtains let in a thin line of pale light that cut across the carpet and stopped at the foot of the bed. Oscar was awake before it reached him. He lay still for a moment, listening to the low hum of the climate unit and the distant sound of traffic beginning its routine. The room felt unused already, as if he had never occupied it. He showered quickly. The water was warmer than in the older motels, but it carried no comfort. Steam gathered on the mirror and blurred his reflection into a shape without detail. When he wiped it clear, the face that returned looked composed, functional. He dressed without hesitation, folded the thin towel once, and placed it on the rack with measured precision. In the lobby, he slid the key card across the counter. The clerk gave a brief nod and said nothing more. Outside, the sky was a pale, uninterrupted blue. The parking lot had begun to fill with cars whose owners were already inside the nearby offices and stores. The day had assumed its structure without him. He unlocked the Ford and paused with his hand on the doorframe. The metal was cool beneath his fingers. He checked the tires visually, and the mirrors, and the fuel level full. He started the engine and listened to its steady idle. The sound had become familiar enough to feel neutral, neither reassuring nor concerning. Pulling back onto the highway, he merged into the morning flow. 500 more miles lay ahead, indistinguishable from the 500 behind him. The sun rose higher, illuminating the road in plain detail. Oscar maintained his lane and his speed. There was no conclusion to mark, no threshold to cross, only continuation, the quiet architecture of exile, sustained by fuel, distance, and the refusal to turn the engine off. The last melt in the glass. The heat lay over the blue star like a sheet that had forgotten how to move. Outside, the plains of Nebraska trembled above the asphalt. The highway murmured in the distance, steady and indifferent, like a sea no one had chosen. Inside, a fan turned slowly, slicing the thick light into tired pieces. Elias sat in the corner, his shirt clinging to his back, his forearms darkened by years of sun through a truck window that had never fully closed. Behind the counter, the ice machine coughed and shuddered. It produced cloudy cubes, misshapen and soft at the edges. Marta struck it once with her palm. It obeyed. The sound of ice hitting glass was brief and sharp, a clean fracture in the heavy room. Elias watched her hand, the precision of it. She placed the glass before him without asking. He poured the cheap whiskey carefully. The liquid slid over the cubes and settled. For a moment the edges held. Then they began to round. He leaned forward. "They never last long enough," he said. "The moment they feel the alcohol, they give in." Marta wiped the counter with a damp cloth. She did not argue. "People want everything cold," she said quietly. "They forget it's only a pause." The ice cracked once, a small surrender. A car stopped at the gas station across the road, filled its tank, and left without hesitation. Elias lifted his glass, but did not drink. The last cube trembled in the amber, shrinking into itself. The best moment had already passed. What remained was thinner, warmer. Not regret only, fact. The taste was fading, and there was no repair for that. By evening, the sky burned a dirty pink before turning gray. Marta switched off the ice machine. Its absence rang louder than its noise. Elias set the empty glass down. A damp circle remained on the wood. He stood, nodded once, and stepped into the hot night. No promises. Only darkness and distant headlights moving towards somewhere that would also melt. Morning did not arrive. It merely replaced the dark. The blue star stood the same way it had the night before, low and patient beneath a colorless sky. Elias had not driven far. His truck rested behind the motel, dust settling over the windshield as if to close its eyes. He returned to the bar before the heat had fully risen. Marta was already there, aligning glasses with the care of someone arranging stones on a grave. A fan turned. The ice machine cleared its throat. Elias chose the same stool. Habit required no discussion. Marta placed the glass before him, dry and expectant. He noticed a thin crack along its rim, almost invisible unless the light struck it just so. She filled it with the cloudy cubes. They looked smaller today. He did not pour immediately. He watched the ice sweat. The droplets gathered and fell, patient as time. "I used to measure days in miles," he said. "Now it's only by what disappears." Marta rested both palms on the counter. "Miles disappear too," she answered. "You just don't see where they go." The machine rattled behind her, laboring for another tray. He poured. The whiskey folded around the cubes. They shifted, knocking softly against the glass. The sound was less sharp this time, almost tired. He took a slow drink. The cold struck first, honest and brief. Then the warmth. Then nothing distinct at all. Outside, a truck roared past without slowing. Elias finished what remained and set the glass down. The crack in the rim caught a thin line of light. Marta did not reach for it yet. They both watched the last fragment of ice surrender, thinning into the drink until it was no longer separate from it. By the third day, the heat had settled into the walls. It no longer pressed. It simply existed. The blue star smelled of old wood, dust, and the faint sweetness of spilled liquor that had dried and risen again. Elias entered without looking around. Marta was counting coins behind the counter, stacking them into small, exact columns. The ice machine was quiet, as if gathering strength. He took his place. The stool gave a soft complaint beneath his weight. Outside, the plains lay flat and endless, the highway drawing a thin gray line through nothing. A truck's brakes screamed somewhere far off, then silence returned. Marta brought the glass. This time the cubes were uneven, one larger than the rest, cloudy at its core. She struck the machine once more before it stilled. Elias poured slowly. The whiskey slid down the sides and settled at the bottom. The largest cube resisted at first. It held its shape, refusing the amber tide. He watched it closely. "Some things last longer," he said, almost to himself. Marta wiped the same strip of wood she had wiped yesterday. "Only by a few minutes," she replied. He lifted the glass. The first sip was colder than expected. It made his teeth ache. He let it pass. The second was softer. The large cube had begun to split, a thin white fracture spreading through it like a quiet thought. Water gathered at the base, unnoticed except by him. When evening approached, the light turned thin and metallic. Elias set the empty glass down. The last piece of ice had dissolved without drama. Only a faint chill clung to the rim. He placed money on the counter, more than necessary, and stood. Marta did not look up. The highway continued its distant murmur, carrying away what little had been held. The fourth evening arrived with wind. It dragged dust across the parking lot and pressed it against the motel windows. The blue star trembled slightly in its frame, but held. Elias came in later than usual. His shirt was clean, though it hung on him as if borrowed from a man who no longer needed it. Marta was adjusting the small radio behind the counter. It caught only fragments of a song before dissolving into static. The ice machine struggled longer this time. Its metal sides rattled like loose bones. Marta struck it twice. The cubes it released were thin, almost transparent. She set the glass before Elias and waited a second longer than before, as if measuring something unseen. He nodded once. He poured. The liquid climbed the fragile shapes and seemed to claim them immediately. There was no resistance, only a soft clicking as they touched the glass. Elias did not speak. He watched the ice surrender with a speed that felt indecent. Marta leaned against the counter. "It's easier when you stop expecting it to last," she said. He considered this, then answered, "Expectation is the only cold left." Outside, a storm gathered, but did not break. Lightning flickered somewhere beyond the plains, silent at this distance. Elias drank slowly. Each sip was warmer than the last. The ice did not crack. It simply thinned and became indistinguishable from what surrounded it. When the wind eased, the room felt larger. Elias set the empty glass down with care. No circle of moisture, remained only a faint smear where his fingers had rested. Marta turned off the radio. The silence that followed was complete, steady as the land beyond the window. Elias stood, paused as if to speak, then chose not to. He stepped back into the dust, carrying nothing that could be kept. The fifth day brought a sky without color. The plains seemed closer, as if the horizon had stepped forward during the night. The blue star waited under the pale light, unchanged. Elias entered before noon. There was no dust on him now. Even the lines on his face appeared quieter, as if they had agreed to rest. Marta was cleaning the ice machine. Its back panel lay open, wires exposed like thin veins. A small pool of water had gathered beneath it. She did not look surprised to see him. "It won't hold much longer," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth. He nodded and took his seat. She filled the glass with what little ice remained. The cubes were small and almost clear, their edges already soft. Elias poured the whiskey without ceremony. The liquid met the ice, and there was no sharp sound this time, only a faint shifting, like breath leading a body. They watched in silence. "I drove 1,000,000 miles, he said after a while. None of them stayed. Marta closed the panel of the machine and unplugged it. "Nothing stays," she replied. "It only changes temperature." The last fragment of ice dissolved quickly, leaving the drink thin and ordinary. Elias finished it without tasting. He placed the glass down and turned it slightly, studying the empty bottom. No moisture circle formed. The wood remained dry. Marta carried the silent ice machine toward the back room. Elias stood, left money on the counter, and walked out into the flat light of afternoon. The highway continued to murmur, but he did not look toward it. A ticket to anywhere. Terminal B held the night the way a wound holds salt. Neon light lay flat over the sterile floor, cold and without mercy. Beyond the glass, the plains of Nebraska stretched into darkness, cut by the climbing lights of departing planes. They rose slowly, like tired stars that had decided to leave the sky. Liam sat on a plastic chair beneath the departures board. At his feet rested an old leather suitcase. It was almost weightless. Inside there was nothing but air and a faint smell of dust from a lining that had outlived its purpose. A cleaning machine moved across the tiles with patient indifference, leaving a damp trace that vanished within seconds. Liam watched it as if it were demonstrating something essential. Here no one knew his name. The anonymity was precise, almost surgical. It was the closest thing to freedom he allowed himself that night. He approached the counter when the line had thinned. He did not buy a ticket. He asked about flight times he already knew by heart. Olivia adjusted her glasses and studied the screen that glowed against her tired face. A cheap plastic badge clung to her blouse. She understood the ritual. He understood that she understood. Between them hovered a small mechanical lie that neither wished to dismantle. It kept the air moving. Back in his seat, Liam opened the suitcase just enough to drop in an empty paper cup. The leather was cracked along the edges. He had bought it 10 years earlier, when he still believed distance could alter fate. Now it was an object that remembered more than he did. He ran his hand across it, the way one touches an old scar, not to heal it, only to confirm it is still there. In the darkened window, he saw his reflection. A man waiting, though not for anything specific. He knew that even if he boarded a flight to Portland or Miami, the emptiness would travel with him, seated politely beside him. Geography does not repair what has quietly collapsed inside. It only rearranges the scenery. Outside, another plane lifted into the sky. Inside, nothing moved. The loudspeaker crackled without conviction. Names were called. Cities were announced. None of them belonged to him. Liam remained seated as the terminal thinned and thickened again with passing waves of travelers. Time did not advance here. It circulated. The fluorescent light hummed above him like an insect that refused to die. A young man lowered himself into the chair beside him. He carried a military surplus backpack, stained at the seams. His hands trembled, whether from cold or from the first encounter with departure. It was impossible to tell. "Is this the flight to Denver?" he asked. His voice was careful, as if the answer might alter his future. Liam nodded. He did not check the board. The boy exhaled and stared at the runway lights. He spoke about work waiting somewhere west, about a cousin who had promised something steady. The words came quickly, arranged like sandbags against doubt. Liam listened without looking at him. He had once spoken the same way to strangers, to himself. Promise was easiest before movement. The boy searched his pockets and produced a crushed pack of cigarettes. Liam handed him a lighter. Their fingers touched briefly. Dry warmth against dry warmth. For a second, there was a transfer nothing dramatic, only the recognition that both were balanced on edges of different cliffs. The flame held steady despite the draft from the sliding doors. When boarding began, the boy stood too fast. He thanked Liam with a sincerity that bordered on apology. Then he walked toward the gate, shoulders squared against the unknown. Liam watched until the line absorbed him. The suitcase remained by his feet, patient and unaccusing. Another departure completed itself. He did not feel lighter. The gate closed with a muted click. The terminal exhaled. For a moment, there was only the echo of rolling suitcases and the distant growl of engines moving away from Earth. Liam remained seated. The empty chair beside him cooled quickly, as if it had never held anyone at all. He took out his phone. The screen was cracked in a thin web, a fracture spreading from one corner like a quiet confession. He scrolled through numbers he no longer used. The factory. A supervisor whose voice had once carried authority. A woman whose name now looked unfamiliar, stripped of warmth by time. He did not call. He studied the names the way one studies inscriptions on neglected stones. Outside, rain began to fall. It slid down the wide glass panes in slow, deliberate lines. The runway lights blurred, then steadied again. A plane taxied through the water, its wings cutting reflections into broken pieces. Movement existed everywhere, but within him. He felt neither regret nor longing, only recognition. The suitcase shifted slightly when he nudged it with his shoe. He imagined leaving it by the trash bin near the vending machines. A simple gesture. 10 steps. He even stood and carried it halfway there. The handle pressed into his palm, familiar and indifferent. Then a dull ache settled in his chest, not conscience, not sentiment, habit, the body's refusal to detach from what it has carried too long. He returned to his seat, placed the suitcase carefully beside him, sat down. The rain thickened, drumming softly against the roof. Somewhere in the distance, another announcement began, blurred by static. Liam leaned back and closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen to the steady persistence of things that continue, whether one moves or not. Toward morning, the light changed, though no one announced it. The neon lost its authority. A grayness gathered beyond the glass, thin at first, then deliberate. The planes revealed themselves without drama flat, patient, unwilling to impress. Liam had not slept. His eyes burned, but the fatigue felt ordinary, almost deserved. A security guard walked past, slow and indifferent, boots sounding softly against the tiles. For a second, the guard's gaze lingered on the unattended suitcase. Liam placed his hand on it before the question could form. The gesture was instinctive. Possession mattered less than the appearance of it. He rose and walked toward the automatic doors. The air near the exit carried the metallic scent of rain and jet fuel. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under a pale sky. Rows of cars waited like obedient animals. His old Ford stood near the far edge, rust biting into its doors. It had outlasted promises and employment alike. He paused before stepping through. Behind him, the terminal resumed its rhythm, another wave of travelers, another list of departures. He understood then that staying and leaving required the same effort. Movement was not the opposite of paralysis. It was simply another version of it. Liam pushed through the doors. The cold morning received him without comment. Rain touched his face and did not linger. He placed the suitcase in the passenger seat and started the engine. The radio offered only static. He did not adjust it. The car rolled slowly toward the exit, not toward a destination, but away from the light that never changed anything. The highway ran parallel to the airport fence before dissolving into open land. Morning pressed low against the windshield, colorless and without promise. Liam drove with both hands on the wheel. The suitcase lay beside him, tilted slightly with each curve, as if uncertain of its loyalty. He passed the long-term parking lot, the car rentals, the billboard promising easy credit and warmer places. The letters were already peeling at the corners. A plane roared overhead, lifting cleanly into the pale sky. For a moment he followed it with his eyes, then returned to the road. Altitude belonged to other men. At the first gas station beyond the exit ramp, he stopped. The canopy lights still burned, though the sun had risen. He filled the tank slowly, listening to the mechanical click of the pump. The sound was exact, almost comforting. He opened the suitcase on the passenger seat while he waited. Nothing inside but the empty cup and a thin layer of dust. He removed the cup and placed it in the trash. For a second, he considered leaving the suitcase there, propped against the bin between windshield fluid and faded advertisements. The thought held no drama, only a practical simplicity. He closed the lid instead. The leather resisted slightly before yielding. He returned it to the seat and tightened his grip on the handle. Back on the road, the planes widened without objection. There was no revelation, no decisive turn, only the steady hum of tires against asphalt and the knowledge that evening would come again. By night, he might find himself in Terminal B once more, beneath the same light, rehearsing the same departure. The engine carried him forward. Nothing else did. By noon, the sky had cleared into a pale, exhausted blue. The land remained unchanged, fields flattened by wind, barns leaning without complaint. Liam drove without choosing a direction. The road chose for him. Intersections appeared and passed. He did not consult a map. He stopped in a town that existed only because the highway permitted it. A diner stood at the corner, chrome dulled by years of dust. Inside, the air smelled of grease and disinfectant. He ordered coffee and sat near the window. The suitcase rested against his leg, a quiet animal that refused to wander. Across the street, a hardware store displayed shovels and rope, objects meant for work, objects that assumed continuity. Liam watched a man load fertilizer into the bed of a truck. The gesture was precise, practiced. It carried a future within its soil to turn, something to grow. He finished his coffee without tasting it. When he stepped back outside, the sun had hardened. Heat rose from the asphalt in trembling lines. He placed the suitcase in the trunk this time. The separation felt different, though the distance was only metal and fabric. He closed the lid carefully and stood for a moment with his hand resting on it. He understood then that the weight had never belonged to the suitcase. It traveled elsewhere, beneath the ribs, behind the eyes, in the pauses between decisions. He returned to the driver's seat and started the engine. The town receded in the rearview mirror, reduced to a collection of shapes without memory. The road stretched forward again, patient and uncommitted. By late afternoon, the wind rose. It moved across the fields in long, invisible corridors, bending the dry grass without breaking it. Liam drove until the highway thinned into a 2-lane road, then into something narrower. The world felt less observed here. Fewer signs, fewer promises. He pulled over near an abandoned grain elevator. Its concrete surface was cracked, letters half erased by sun and time. The place had once organized labor and harvest. Now it organized nothing. He turned off the engine. Silence settled heavily, disturbed only by the ticking of cooling metal. He opened the trunk. The suitcase lay where he had placed it, obedient and mute. He lifted it out and carried it across the gravel. Each step produced a small, dry sound. He set the suitcase down beside the elevator wall. For a moment, he simply stood there, hands empty. He opened it fully. The interior lining, faded and brittle, revealed nothing new. No hidden compartment. No forgotten document. Only air. The emptiness seemed almost deliberate now, as if it had waited for inspection. He ran his fingers along the seams one last time, then closed it without force. He left it there, not in anger, not as an act of courage, only as a correction. When he returned to the car, the absence in the trunk did not lighten him. It clarified something. The road ahead remained unchanged. He started the engine and drove on, leaving the suitcase to weather and dust, another object relinquished to the plains. Evening descended without color. The sky dimmed in stages, as if reconsidering each shade before surrendering it. Liam drove until the road rejoined a broader highway, then followed the signs back toward the city. He did not reflect on the turn. It occurred as naturally as breathing. The airport lights appeared first small, disciplined points against the darkening land. They did not invite. They simply existed. Traffic thickened near the exit ramp. Rental cars, taxis, families returning from somewhere that required explanation. Liam merged without urgency. He parked in short term this time. The engine idled for a moment before he shut it off. The trunk was empty. The absence felt precise, almost architectural. He stepped out and walked toward the terminal entrance, hands unoccupied, pockets shallow. Inside, Terminal B resumed its fluorescent vigil. The same chairs, the same polished floor. The departure board flickered through destinations that promised climates and narratives. Liam stood beneath it, lighter by one object and unchanged in other ways. He did not approach the counter. He did not search for Olivia. He selected a city at random, one whose name carried no memory. When the line shortened, he purchased a ticket. The paper felt thin between his fingers. For the first time in years, the ritual altered slightly. The emptiness had not disappeared. It had simply lost its container.